I'm really excited about today's episode. Today I have Aiua Wild coming back on to interview me about my darkness experience that I had recently. This is something that I've been excited to try for a number of years. I've done a lot of research, listened to a lot of people that have talked or that have done this experience, talked to a lot of people that have done this experience, and it's something that for whatever reason was calling to me. And so I recently just got back from my 5 days in the darkness and had just an amazing experience. And I'm excited to share this with you. So, Awa has graciously agreed to come on and hold space for me and ask me probing questions about the experience so that I could, share this experience with the listeners out there that might be interested in maybe what this modality can offer you. So, I'm very grateful for Awa for being here, and I'm grateful for all of you for listening. That's one of the things that I found in the darkness was how much gratitude I have for the life that is in front of me, not the life that I wish I had or the life that I wish I do have. It's the life that's currently being lived. There's a reason it's here, and I'm very excited to live it, and I'm excited to share this experience with you. Hope you get something out of the conversation. We'll see you on the other side. It's funny because I really want to find it. I didn't realize I started all my shows the same way
Yeah.
until recently. Somebody mentioned it, and I was like, "Ah, God damn it!" Now, how do I start these now? Because now I'm like so self conscious. So let's see how we do this. So yeah, I just want to go right to it. Welcome back to the show. I'm just gonna do it. I don't fucking care. I'll figure out another way later. Welcome back to the show.
Yes.
Today, it's kind of fun one. This is fun. So Awa, who's a return guest, dear friend, amazing human being, a facilitator and owner of Wild Nature Retreats, just a beautiful practitioner, human being, top to bottom, right? Been on the show multiple times. We have just fun conversations that sometimes go where they're supposed to go and sometimes go where they need to go, right?
Yep.
And you approached me with this idea a couple weeks ago, and you wanted to interview me for the show, and I said that's great, but hold on because I'm about to go into this cool experience, and I'd love for you to kind of like tag that on, and so. So here we are. So A was going to interview me about the life that I've lived in whatever way she wants to, and we'll kind of weave in this darkness experience that I recently had,
Hmm.
which was fucking profound as hell. Like it was so cool, like terrifying and amazing, and all the things in between. So, and life is always happening for all of us, and life for me has been very lifey lately. And so I'm kind of interested to see where this conversation goes myself because there's just been a lot of shit going on in life. So
Yeah.
thanks. Yeah. Thanks for being here. Thanks for doing this.
Yeah, I want to say welcome back.
Yeah.
Welcome back to the show.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is fun for me because I know we've talked about it. It's maybe been about 6 years since I said I'm going to start my own podcast.
Mm-hmm.
And I got as far as working with a producer at one point. I signed up for an online course, researched all the equipment. I have the name. I
Mm-hmm.
even stole it on Instagram already, so it doesn't disappear.
Good for you.
And I have a list of probably over 150 topics that I've been saving that I will probably never get to because it's always new and evolving and I like to be in the now. But
Mm-hmm.
there's definitely some hot ones that I wanted to go back to. So the idea of getting to interview was super exciting for me. One of the It's funny. I'm like, ooh, do I want to share it? And it's like, well, we talked about this. It's
Uh-huh.
my idea, but I'm not the only one who got it. So if somebody takes it and runs with it, it's okay.
Right.
One of the segments, the first name that I had was going to be called Sit With Me.
Mm.
And I wanted to sit with people and hear their stories, and particularly people experiencing homelessness,
Mm.
people in or fresh out of prison, teachers,
Yeah.
nurses, moms, right? The elders, that was a big one. I wanted to sit with the people who have lived a long time and hear their stories and more importantly, the stories about the guilt and or shame that we may have carried for one reason or another and what we had learned from it.
Yeah.
And coming from a background of recovery, that was a big part of, I sat in the room, the 12 steps room, for a long time.
Yeah.
So before we started, I said, I want to dig deep. And are there any areas you don't want to talk about? And you said, no, I'm an open book.
No,
So
let's see where we
you
go
get to edit it.
That's true. I get the final say.
You get the
I do
final
get
say.
Before we get into that, I got one question for you because I feel like I think we've talked about this before, but you kind of just like crack the door a little bit. Do you look forward to being an elder?
I really do.
I already and I mean this in a wisdom way, in just like the most respectful. You already are in my eyes. You already are an elder, right? And not in the age that you hold, but the wisdom that you carry and the way you impart that wisdom. It's like you find time to take time to talk with people and to share, right? And it's not. I can see some people be dismissive at times, right? And I get it. We got our energies, we got to respect it. And even sometimes, like, as hard as it is, like as bad as I feel, sometimes I'm like, I don't have time for this conversation. Like all my energy is gone. Like I'm a wringed out rag right now.
Yeah.
But that being said, like I do feel that you have that elderness wisdom to you, and so I think that's something we're lacking in this world right now. A lot of that elder wisdom and that way to impart that wisdom down.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, I do appreciate that. I've had people, we consider the maiden, the mother, and the crone.
Mm-hmm.
And I do feel that I have stepped into my crone phase. It's not always there.
Mm-hmm.
And I can sure as shit quick whip into my maiden, and forget
Oh yeah.
my mother and crone energy. And what I've learned in that is how to be humble, which is part of the wisdom, right? To remain teachable.
Mm-hmm.
Over the last couple weeks, my inner assignment that keeps coming is to ask a lot of questions, and that's how my practice has been with my clients. Is I do hear a lot of stories, and I have learned how to ask the questions for them to get to their aha, even though I can already see.
Yep.
Because that felt sense within someone when their own light gets turned on from their own doing is way more impactful than me saying, well, let's take a look at this thing over here that is so blatantly obvious to the observer, right? But when we're in it, we're in it.
Yeah.
And so...
well, that champions the ego too. And that's the big part of this healing journey is the ego's got to feel like it's done its part.
Yeah.
And so, like you said, when you can lead, and it's not like you're manipulating somebody, but you can see, right? For what your perception is, you can see maybe an aha moment that they can be led to.
Yeah.
And that Socratic method is the way it was taught to me by a manager back in my day was, you ask probing questions. You continue to ask the questions, right? You don't give the answers. And then as you ask the questions, their ego's like, but there's and there it just like follows that bouncing ball, and then all of a sudden they're like championing themselves, hands in the air, like I did it, I found why I'm fucked up. Cool, now let's fix it, But it's such a beautiful thing to get your own ego out of the way and understand that you're the Samwise in somebody's fucking journey to drop the ring in the goddamn fucking lava, right? You're not Frodo. You can't do it yourself, but you can really help Frodo along by just like probing him and like carrying him a little bit of the way, get the fucking golems out, all that shit. Like, come on, man. Like we can do all this stuff.
Well, and what is so blaringly obvious. So I've been coaching now for almost 8 years. And I've been in like the spiritual growth, development, recovery space for 16 years. But particularly as I've been consistently sitting down with human beings, unpacking their trauma and really helping empower them, what I can universally say is we are all the same. And to be a channel to sit with people. Really, like, a lot of us, we may or may not love the word healer or space holder or facilitator, and I use all of them intermittently depending on my mood.
Right.
It's the ability to sit with someone and to listen to their perspective and allow the evolution of their mind to be able to express. And that's where somatics comes in, right? And yeah, it's fascinating to consider, because even shit like a week ago, I was losing it. I was just like really in a dark space and looking around going, what am I doing? Right? To the point where I was like, I hate my dogs. Get rid of them.
Oh, no. Your dogs are so sweet.
They're so sweet. And today, like, they came running in. I had to run home before coming here to make sure I could let them out. And they both they are so great, right? And one of them's a problem child. He's got anxiety. But anyway, I heard the cue. Enough about me. Let's turn the mirror back over to you. But I appreciate the sentiment and the compliment. That really means a lot to me, because I see the same in you and I hear that from people, right? We share a lot of similar community members, and you come and offer your offerings in our space. And we've known each other now for close to 8 years.
Yeah. Getting up there.
When you were managing and I was using this space and doing my offerings there.
Definitely. Yeah.
But I would love to dive right in, like right now in this moment. Like, close your eyes and just take a breath and notice in your body what is present for you. What are you feeling? And what is inspiring that feeling?
Well, honesty always. I'm trying to practice not brutal honesty, because I don't think there's space for that, but just my personal honesty. I'm extremely exhausted, extremely exhausted. But there's an awareness to the exhaustion this time, instead of like kind of a push through.
Right.
And so one of the things that I've experienced, and what I'm trying to experience right now after this darkness experience that I've had, is, I had an opportunity to clear out all the shit, right? Dopamine fast, get a lot of clarity, which we'll go through all that stuff here shortly. But as I get back into life, even though I created space to come back, like I had, a 6-day experience there, 5 days in the dark, a day integration afterwards. And then I didn't schedule any work until, I got out on a Saturday. I'm sorry, I left on a Friday to come back, and my first day of work back wasn't officially till a Thursday. So I gave myself some time. Yeah. But I still had a schedule that this fucking incredible Hulk fucking superhero Adam decided that he could make and withhold and uphold and do all this shit. And so now I'm not the victim, I shouldn't say that, but now I'm working the schedule that the champion Adam decided to make.
You're learning the lessons.
Oh, it's just so exhausting.
Yeah. I want to pause for a second and have you define, because you've said it a few times, but maybe for some of your listeners, what is a darkness experience?
Okay. So I let me just, preface this. I found deprivation tanks, float tanks, a couple years ago, probably right before COVID. I had a friend tell me, you should try this. It's great. You're doing a lot of yoga. This is good recovery for yoga. You're floating in 200 gallons of water, 200 pounds of Epsom salt. It's good for inflammation of the body, all that stuff. So like, I'll give it a shot, right? So went in there, closed the tank. I don't have any issues with darkness. I've never experienced any kind of darkness outside of just turn the lights off kind of darkness. Be in the woods, really kind of creepy darkness stuff. But that was the first time I experienced purposeful, complete darkness without really even knowing that was what a byproduct of this was. I was just going for the float.
Right.
And And there was something about being able to lay with my eyes open and not know really if my eyes were open or closed because there was no change. There was like I could hold my hand in front of my face and not get used to the idea that I could eventually see that. It was
Right.
dark. And so I fell in love with that. And I did that. I've been doing that for years now. Like at least once a month, I go to the float tank. There's a big shout out to Rubicon down in Juanita. Go there, have membership there. It's fantastic space. But so as I'm doing this, one of my favorite podcasts to listen to is the Aubrey Marcus podcast. Love what he does. I have found myself thinking about a lot of the ideas that have been brought up through that show, whether it's guests that he's had on, ideas that he's brought up personally, and not to say like I feel like all those ideas were great ideas, but it's a show that makes you think about a lot of different things in different ways, and it's like I fucking love that, right?
Yeah.
And he had experienced it. He went to a darkness experience, and
I listened to that one too.
oh my God, and the way he spoke about it, and the way that and I appreciate the way he approaches his life. He does a lot of medicine work. He does a lot of personal work, men's work, all that fun stuff, right? And I like
Relational work.
yeah, I love how, like when people can talk about that, right? Because it's not something that's very widely done or known about. And so he had that experience and then, moved him so much. He did like a little documentary on YouTube about it. I started to noodle about that, do some research myself. So for about 2 years, I was looking into this whole darkness idea. Listen to different podcasts, different people. I found a place in Oregon that I think a lot of the people that I'd listened to went, called Sky Cave, and looked like a beautiful facility, but they're on like a 2-year like wait list, and so I got on their wait list, but there was something inside me like you keep looking. This is something you need to do, right? Keep looking.
Yeah.
And so I kept looking, and I found a place in Colorado. There's a bunch of places in Europe and like Iceland and shit like that. Then I found this place called Darkness Retreats Oregon down in Tidewater, Oregon, which is just outside of Corvallis, out OSU area. And it's really small. I think they had like 2 rooms that they do the darkness in. You're by yourself, and so I applied and got an immediate response and had an interview with the facilitators, and I fell in love with this lady Viv, the main woman that was doing the interview, and she was just like I could tell she could hold space. I could tell she's passionate about what she was doing, and the best thing about it all is like they could get me in right away, and I'm like, cool. I really want that. I really need that.
Yeah.
It's carved out time, went to them. So the darkness, to answer your question in a long way, it's the experience I had was 5 days in complete and total darkness. Again, not darkness like you can eventually tell there's a table in front of you. It's like dark, dark, dark. What I didn't realize until after the fact, which I get, there's purists in everything that we do, right?
Yeah.
There's purists in plant medicine, there's purists in whatever, right? And so there's purists in darkness stuff too, right? And so I was in a house, in a room that was blacked out, but apparently that's a level, and there's levels, but more intense levels than
Right.
that, where you're like in a cave. So like 0 photons can ever enter the area of space and blah, blah, blah. So there's like apparently levels of, and I don't know where the spectrum of my experience sat on the level of, but
Does it matter?
it doesn't matter. Yeah, there was no light. It was just
You're exactly where you're supposed to be.
exactly right. So 5 days. So I did 5 days immersed in the darkness. They took care of my food. I had bathroom access, all that stuff, but everything was dark. Everything was completely dark the entire time, and it was so profound. It was so profound. Like it was such a cool experience just to create that time and to be held in space instead of to hold the space.
That's interesting because everything in me panics at the idea. So the float tanks, the first time I went, I wasn't sure I was going to be able to close it. I'm claustrophobic.
Okay.
It's not the darkness when I know I can get out within an hour, that's triggering for me.
Right.
Closing the pod and being inside. I did eventually,
Okay.
and I loved it, and it was
Okay.
beautiful. And I was like, God, I wish I knew this existed when I was pregnant. Like to
Oh,
be
I bet for your
so heavy with the baby in the body, and to go into that would have just been
yeah,
heavenly.
feel
So
supported
all the
still.
women that
Yeah.
are like carrying children, even if you're just, new mom and you're still carrying that baby, oh my God, please go find one. And, we've only just chatted coming in here today, and everything that you've said so far is like, what I hear is that it was nourishing to
Yes.
be held. What did it actually feel like in the first hour? I mean, obviously you don't have a clock, right?
Yeah.
But at what point did you settle in? Were you grounded going in there?
So I had a nice, I'd say a 6 hour drive down there from Seattle. So I just drove down and I set it up to where I had a number of podcasts that I wanted to listen to. Nothing, not trying to incite or entice a purpose or just to give myself something to think about, right? Just to noodle about, just to see like it's like the whole idea of like if I'm stuck on an idea, if I'm stuck on a concept and I like writing a song and I'm going to go to a bookshelf and pick a random book, open to a random page and random passage, the inspiration you find from that. Right. And I find myself with podcasts or audiobooks like that a lot where, you'll kind of drift in and out, you kind of listen, you kind of don't. But when you do start to listen again, it's like, oh, why did you start listening to that part? Right.
Yeah.
And so I had a couple moments like that going into it. But coming like that first bit of time, I don't know. It was very interesting to me because like I was very ready to just be there. Like it felt drawn there. I felt like it was right. I didn't have any like, I couldn't justify any of the apprehensions I had. Right. There were definitely apprehensions. There's definitely like, oh my God, darkness, panic. What day, all this shit. I mean, to be fair, like I'm a daily weed smoker, right? And so I'm not going to smoke weed while I'm there. No plant medicines, no hape, no microdosing. All this stuff. And that's just stuff that you have to visit in your head to give yourself the understanding that you visited it. It's
Right.
like even though I'm 5 years without alcohol in my system. When dramatic things happen in my life, I thought experiment about what it would be like to step towards alcohol in this moment. It's not like a craving that I have, but if I don't allow myself to just thought experiment what it's like to appease grief, try to appease grief of my mom's death with drinking,
Right.
then I'll always wonder, right? But if I let myself think about it in a thought experiment kind of way, then I realize that, okay, Adam, you haven't drank in 5 years. You're going to get extremely obliterated after probably one drink, but you're going to keep going, right? So now you're going to get just fucking blackout drunk. You're going to be hungover for days. You're going to beat yourself up for months, if not years, right?
Right.
All of this to not even appreciate being intoxicated because of your tolerance level being shit.
Right.
Doesn't sound worth it to me, bro. Right?
Yeah.
And you got to play that out sometimes to really feel and say like, no, okay, I champion this idea that it's not good, right? It's like appeasing the ego like we talked about earlier,
Yeah.
right?
It takes me all about 3 seconds. I'll have 15 years in July of
fuck
being
yeah.
sober. And every once in a while, and I would say more so in the last like handful of years, has the thought crossed my mind. And it's almost like, ew, no.
Yeah, right?
Right?
Yeah.
Like the moment that I consider the effect that it would have on my body.
Yeah.
So then over a 5-day period, going into it grounded, which is impressive, right? Like because watching Aubrey in his YouTube documentary, and then there was another gentleman that I watched, I think before Aubrey, they talk about the potentiality of experiencing what you might with plant medicine, like
Right.
visions and psychedelics, sensation and things like that. When I've done medicine, there's always a point of a trigger of anxiety and fully letting go.
Yeah.
And the thing that I struggle to let go of is time. And in the darkness for that, there's no up, there's no down. I mean, you have a sense of down because gravity, thank you.
Right. Yeah.
But all of that is taken away. Like my private practice is called sensuous revival.
Right.
That's about my senses, right? So in there, it leaves me with my relationship to my sense of intuition and spirit and my connection to God, which is potent and beautiful. And of course, there's my human experience of like when you started talking about, they feed you and you can go to the bathroom and all that stuff. I was like, how do you wipe your ass without being able to see if the toilet paper's clean?
At a bidet.
Oh,
yeah.
But still.
I know. It was weird because I don't use bidets. So I'm like, oh, this is even adding another element of chaos, right? Now I'm pooping in the dark when I do have to, right? And now I've got a bidet that I'm not really confident about because I don't use bidets, so I don't know. So now I have a wet butthole and I still got to wipe just to make sure. And again, like you said, I can't see, so I'm like really trusting the gods right now to make sure I don't trek all the way back to my room in the complete darkness.
So then you sit pee,
down.
Right?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, because there's no aiming at that point. Okay, so side, squirrel moment.
Yeah.
Why the fuck do men stand to pee in general?
Okay, I was gonna address that because my older brother, I just randomly brought this up to him the other day. I've been sitting down to pee for 10 years.
My kids, I was a single mom for a period of time, and then my ex, he won't listen to this, and he would hate that I'm gonna announce it, but I'll put it out there anyway. He sits to pee.
Yeah.
I brought it up at a party one time, and he got really mad at me because I didn't know that it wasn't normal for men to sit and pee, that it's like this thing where you don't tell guys.
Apparently it's like...
My boys have always sat to pee.
Yeah.
And yet, thank you, our toilets don't look like a lot of other toilets that I've seen with boys and their family.
You get a break because you get to sit down.
Yeah.
You don't have to clean as much because you don't have no spray and splatter.
You don't get in trouble for leaving the toilet seat up.
You know? But yeah, I've been sitting down to pee for years, and it's like...
Yep.
It's the best. Now, if I'm at the stadium at like Safeco Field or something like that, or I'm out in public and I'm going to exercise my gift as a man to be able to stand and pee.
Yeah.
And not have to like hover, not have to like work my quads if I don't need to or something.
Yeah.
But if I'm at home, if I'm at like here at the office, if I'm at like your house or something, I'm going to sit down and pee.
Right.
There's no
I
wrong
will
with
say
that.
I appreciated that your toilet seat was not wobbly. That's one thing that drives me nuts when I go into office spaces. You got that wobbly toilet seat where I sit down and I almost slide off the bowl. Like, please, it's not hard. There's a couple screws in the back. Yeah. That's all you got to do is
somebody
just
bite the bullet,
them.
Put the gloves on, just get down there, do your thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it sounds like going into it, you're grounded.
Yeah, it felt good.
I do love being cared for, and there's a natural integration of even having that happen, right? Anybody that's gone on retreat knows that. If your food and your schedule is produced and you come back, 24 hours is not enough time for integration for most of us to be able to hop back into some wild schedule, especially if where you're going and what you're diving into is yourself and places within yourself that you've been maybe intentionally, but sometimes subconsciously avoidant of, how to bring that back and learn how to integrate it into your new sense of self and embodiment that is likely the whole motivation of the process to begin with. Right? Like most people, well, I don't want to say most people, there are a lot of retreats out there that are not for me.
Right.
If I'm going to spend 3 to 10K, it's not to go party with a bunch of other people. I will just say I'm not a fan when I see yoga retreats and then half of the content that's produced later from that retreat is people drunk and, that's just, call me a purist in that regard. But I wrote a blog years ago says yoga's not a mixer.
Right. Yeah.
Right? The brew and, what is it called? I don't know. I've seen yoga and mimosas. I've seen...
we used to do pints and poses at Red Hook.
Pints and poses,
yeah.
Yeah. And I know that there's a bridge, right? Like maybe somebody has never done yoga before and they're like, oh, it's this drinking thing. And that's happening too. And they get introduced and it leads them into something. Cool. it's not something that I would produce as a facilitator, and it's not something I would join in as a consumer.
Right.
But you think about what incentivizes people to do a darkness retreat. So that's what I'm curious. I know you've talked about it being attractive. We've both talked about plant medicine,
Yeah.
meditation. I know you made a hard dedication to like chanting. And so you've had these really beautiful practices. So two things that come that I'm like, ooh, let's dig in.
Yeah.
So you said daily pot smoker. Tell
Yep.
me about that.
So I've made peace with that for now. I
And no judgment.
Yeah, no,
Right?
definitely. And this
Yeah.
is where I talk to myself about this because like there's ways that I can judge myself and create these stories with myself about it, and there's also ways I can justify it without actually looking at myself with doing it,
Right.
right? But but yeah, so I've smoked pot or smoked cannabis, smoked weed, whatever you want to call it.
The
Pretty
devil's
regularly.
lettuce.
Yeah,
That's
right.
what my daughter jokingly calls it.
I was, all through high school until I had my first kid, smoked a ton of weed. Quit for a long time, had kids, career path, blah, blah, blah. And then within the past probably 8 or 9 years got, reintroduced into, and there's just there's something about the way that I feel that cannabis supports my life that matches. There's a mood level, there's an anxiety management, and again, I could be making up a bunch of excuses, and that's fine, right? But what I've got to say to that is like I've justified it within myself at this point in time in my life, and so external input onto that doesn't really fucking matter to me, right?
Yeah.
So, but part of doing stuff like the darkness retreat is to remind myself that I can do stuff without these medicines, right? I can do hard shit. Not just we can do hard shit, right?
Yeah.
I went on this tangent after a yoga class one time, and it's like take all the spirituality shit up away from like yoga and the breath and all this stuff, right? Hot yoga was the example I was using, but like you voluntarily paid money, took time out of your busy fucking day to choose to come to sweat your ass off in this intensely hot class, surrounded by other people choosing to sweat their ass off. For whatever reason, right? Again, take the spirituality out of it, right? But when you're done and you're laying in that shavasana at the end, and you could do 10 minutes of yoga and have it 50-minute shavasana. You can do all 60 minutes of yoga, whatever. It doesn't matter, right? But when you hit your point and you're laying down at the end and you're doing your shavasana, there's this thing that you got to understand that, like, you've just banked the fact you can do hard shit on a voluntary basis, right? Because life's going to throw shit at you sideways sometimes, right? People are going to die. You're going to lose a job. Things are not going to go your way, right? Not always, but it happens, right? And if we're ready and we have these peaceful practices built up, or we have this bank of known hard shit that we can do kind of in that bank, in that backup, then we know that, okay, you know what? I sat for, this is me. This is my head. This is not like touting an ego thing. This is just like, again, this is my internal monologue. Okay, my dog is 14. Right. Both my parents have passed. All my grandparents have passed. Unless something catastrophic happens with one of my, immediate family members that are younger than me or my siblings, I'm not expecting anything to happen soon.
Right.
My dog is 14. She's not got that much time left in this world.
Yeah.
That's really sad to me. Right. And so I'm banking hard shit to do because that's going to be some hard shit that's going to hit me one of these days soon that I'm not going to be really prepared for.
Yeah.
Right. But I have the fortune of seeing that coming, but we still don't know what's going to happen. I could get a car accident on the way home, right?
Right.
A couple of years ago, my daughter was walking her dog on her bike and flew over the handlebars and compound fractured her left forearm. I had to drive all the way to Richland to sit with her as she got surgery.
Right.
But, peaceful practices are there for me. So, like, I got hard shit banked up that I can do, right?
Yeah.
So, I'm not touting an ego thing, but I'm just saying, like, we need to understand, like, that we know that we can do this. And when you voluntarily do this by your own accord, you get a deeper understanding that you can do this. Again, I'm not special because I can. Everybody can do this shit, but the more you do it, the more you can rely on it because
Right.
it's there.
Yeah.
So
I remember when I was pretty hardcore in the 12-step world, It was like, this is your insurance policy, right? None of us love paying for insurance until we need it and
Right.
it covers a tremendous amount of whatever, right?
Right.
And we could go down that rabbit hole of like what it doesn't cover that we actually need. Oh, I'm falling off the chair. But for me, in reference to what you were just saying, I even had that experience in class this morning. I've been really grateful that I've been able to start really organizing my schedule again to prioritize getting to class at least once or twice a week. And this class in particular, her teaching this Kundalini fusion where we do Kundalini and then we flow for a bit. She's guiding us through, some of the Kriyas, and which for anybody, I didn't know this, even though I'd been practicing Kundalini years ago. Kriya is breath, mantra, and movement all together. And she invited us to feel into what we were wanting to like let go of or break through. And it was this hearts in prayer, standing in Tadasana. And then we would take a breath in, and then the breath out, you would lunge forward, right foot, and then swing your arms open to a T.
Okay.
And then the breath back in was the hands coming back into prayer, stepping back into Tadasana, and then alternating feet, right?
Okay.
So breath in, out. And you can do the mantra, I am, right? Breath in, I, breath out, am. But as she's cheering us on, basically, and encouraging us to keep going, she says, consider what you're needing to let go of. And the thing that rapidly came through my head each time was doubt, doubt, right? And so I was like throwing this out and just like letting go of doubt. And as I was doing it, similar to what you were just talking about, which is funny because a second ago I was like, what were we just talking about?
It always comes back sooner or later.
Right? Is what I jokingly refer to with my clients a lot of times. I call it spiritual cardio. It's like we are building our heart muscle and our brain, right? They are feeding off of each other. And this is where, you were talking about, you said her name was Viv, that runs the darkness retreat.
Yeah.
I'm impressed by myself that I remembered that.
Good for you. Yeah.
I'd be so curious to like learn about her background. There's a lot of people offering a lot of things in the world, and I've kind of ran the spectrum of like super critical and judgmental, right? Being a little bit of a purist in the realm of like, which I do actually plan to write about hopefully soon on my Substack, which has been a little bit quiet lately. But understanding that, for instance, you did a lot of research, right? And I've learned through experience of what happens when I don't do a lot of research, right? My first Aiua experience, I didn't do a lot of research, didn't go so great.
Okay.
Now I do a lot of research before, right? We were just talking about this other retreat that's coming up that I've been asking a lot of questions. And I know that sometimes the people are like, God, why does this woman have so many questions? Like, because I know exactly what I'm looking for.
Right.
And in a world, if you understand that there are different degrees, right? Why we haven't learned to create more structure and communication around a level, right? Yoga does a pretty good job if the studio follows it
Right.
of what a level 1 is, level 2, level 3, right?
Yeah.
But in the world of wellness and the massive amount of trendy shit that's produced today, there's a difference between someone who's gone and studied trauma resolution. For instance, right? Like, I think it was in 2016 or 17 that I did trauma-informed yoga training,
Okay.
which is funny actually, because I don't even think I calculate those hours into my YTT, whatever, it doesn't
Yeah.
matter. And at the time, I was also learning and studying about the trauma resolution that I currently work with, which is more emotional intelligence founded in spiritual practice and discipline, human behavior and psychology, right? Like all of those kind of infused together. And when I was learning trauma-informed yoga, I was incredibly triggered and judgmental about what and how and why they were teaching the way that they were, because to me it was avoidant.
Okay.
And fast forward however many years, if anybody remembered whatever number I just threw out, what year that was, you can calculate it. I've come to realize, like we were just talking about the pints and poses, there's a bridge that's offered by people who are happy to live in that space to connect with people who may otherwise never even know about this other world, right? I just had a meeting with Sean, and I'm going to blank on her last name, but her and a friend of mine, Sterling Rose, that I've worked with, are hosting a women's retreat this summer, which I'm going to be a guest teacher at. And she works with a lot of nurses. And she was a nurse, and now she does business coaching and empowerment coaching, and now she's doing somatic coaching. She was talking about how a lot of her clients know nothing of Eastern medicine or holistic health at all.
Right.
And I've lived in my bubble for so long that I forget that there's a large part of the world that has no clue about this, that, or the other. And why I'm bringing this up is to say that for anybody who listens to this, if you're going to go into something, look at why. What is it that you're drawn to, and what is it that you're looking to gain? And make sure, and this goes into dating, into jobs, into having children, into buying an animal, right? I have 2 of them, and I was like, why do I need the second one? Love him. Love him. I have to remind myself that regularly because he's a lot of work.
Yeah.
So to go back to why I'm bringing this up is when we invest our time and money, which is incredibly valuable, into receiving something that is really important to ourselves. If we don't know what we're looking for, then we don't know what questions to ask to make sure that it's actually going to be what we need. We will make mistakes. We will sign up for things that we don't love. Like, one of the greatest moments in my yoga career was giving myself permission to get up and walk out when I wasn't enjoying myself.
Yeah.
And Danielle Laporte, both of them are amazing teachers in my world. Danielle Laporte was talking about just a few months ago that what she was being guided to do in her yoga practice by that teacher that day continued to trigger her no matter how much she was like processing, and that she realized that for herself it was a loving choice to get up and leave. And that didn't mean that the teacher was teaching something bad or that she was doing something wrong or that, whatever. It just meant that for her in that moment, for her mind and body, that it was better and more loving for her to leave.
Right.
And so considering the darkness retreat and what you invested into doing your research and then getting to that question of like, what was your intention? What did you want to get out of it? Did you feel like it was fulfilled? And was there something that you felt like you gained in addition that was like super profound? And is there still something that you feel like is calling you to do it again?
Yeah. Definitely yes again. There's definitely a call to it. I think there's more of like a continued maintenance call, to do it again. But it, I definitely had intentions to going into it of what I wanted to look at for myself. So, recently my mom passed away from cancer about a year and a half ago. More recently, my relationship with my fiance dissolved of close to 10 years.
How recently?
January.
Okay.
So a couple months, 4 months, 5 months, something like that. And I had already planned the darkness retreat before, my fiance and I separated, but obviously gave me something to think about.
I want to tell you to take a deep breath right there. I feel it.
Yeah, it was divine timing, if you will. Right.
Yeah.
And then, just also like, I don't know, I've done a lot of big work over the years and really haven't had a chance to check in with the self, so I was kind of looking forward to that too, just some time to myself. And, but also wanted to leave it open for, whatever the experience wanted to present to me. Having done research, like you talked about the DMT side of it, I knew some of the stuff that could potentially happen going into it. But I didn't want to let that cloud like an expectation of like, if I don't have a visual experience, then I'm doing this wrong or something like that. Right.
Right.
But I really wanted it to just, I wanted to surrender to the experience and just let it be what it needed to be. I had like I said, I had my intentions. I had a plan for, how I was going to pass the time. Breath work, mantras, a little bit of yoga. I knew the space was going to be big enough to where I could like circle sweep and have like an arm,
Right.
an arm radius kind of area to where I could figure out. So I had some plans going into it, but it was all kind of like, it was all like thrown out the window, like the very first day, which was beautiful. I loved it because it really kind of like, it shook me out of the ritual that I thought I needed to get through this, because I needed this part of it was to get out of my rituals and to be away from those rituals for a little while. One, to show me maybe which ones don't need to be there anymore, but two, to show me like, hey man, like these are actually working, right?
Yeah.
The fact you do them all the time doesn't mean that they're not working. So, but I, the very first day, the first night, so I checked in so Viv was the young lady that was running the place. And Finpo, they're a couple. Finpo is the gentleman. He ended up sitting in the room adjacent to mine. I sat down on Saturday. I think he sat down on like a Monday or Tuesday or something like that. So a couple days after me. So Viv was the main person taking care of me, bringing me food and stuff like that. So checked in, made it clear that they don't want me to fast, and I didn't want to fast. They're not a good idea. I'm like, I don't want to do it. So it's all good.
No,
talked about food and all that shit, frequencies, talked about like check-ins, wellness checks. I told them like once a day is totally fine with me, because in the back of my head, I'm like, okay, well, that'll at least give me an idea that, okay, a day has passed, right? I know what day it is, right? And then they give you a candle. Well, actually, so I really love this. And again, this is my first experience. I don't know how other people do it, but she walked me back into the room with the lights on and said, okay, now just look around, right? Get used to where the lights, where it's at with the lights on. Get used to so the bathroom was not in the room. It was down a hallway, which was all still completely dark. And then the bathroom, just off the hallway. So get used to this pathway with the lights on, right? Now put the mindfold on. So lights were still on, but the mindfold was on. Now do it with the mindfold on so you can peek if you need to. And then when you shut the lights off, your lights are off, right?
Yeah.
So it was cool. Like, so they really stair-stepped it in there, gave me an opportunity to kind of like dial around and like feel it out. Like there were like floor mats that were delineated marks. There were like in the hallway, there were curtains that was like, okay, make it to this first set of curtains. And you realize you got one more set of curtains to go to. So instead of this like 10-foot hallway that you're like, oh my God, I don't know what's going on. There are these like little mile marker kind of things, like, oh, cool. And then you get to the bathroom and you get to the first floor mat. And then the second floor mat, and you take a right, and then there's another floor mat, and then right behind you, there's a shitter. And you're like, okay, cool, right? You're just using your feet, tactileness, right?
Yep. I do this every night when I go to the bathroom. But I have to figure out where the dogs are.
Right, exactly. The moving furry speed bumps, right? Yeah. So Viv gave me a little tea light candle and a lighter and said, okay, so now you're in charge of your light. You go back there, make sure you feel safe, light the candle, do whatever thing you need to. And then, you can blow it out, you can let it go out. So I lit the candle and I basically like hid the lighter in the room, because I'm like, I don't want the opportunity, like the panic to set in and be like, oh, there's a lighter.
Yeah.
I can put some light somewhere.
I know that as soon as you said that, my whole body contracted and I was like, that would be too much responsibility.
Yeah. So I like really just like closed my eyes, hid it somewhere, and I'm like, okay, I'm not going to know where this is at.
Yeah. Turn around 3 times.
Yeah, totally. Turned light off, sat down, meditated. Well, made sure there's no creepy shit under the bed. Like I checked all my boxes, my OCD boxes, my little child boxes, and all that shit. Looked in all the corners, spiders, all like boogeyman type shit. And did a little meditation, opened the container, if you will, and then but I blew out the candle, and I chose to blow out the candle because I wanted to. I didn't want it to. I had this like vision in my head for some reason of like it's gonna be like Hanukkah. It's like the candle that stayed lit for 7 days, and I'm like, why are you still lit? I'm supposed to be in the dark, you know. And I'm not Jewish, so I have no idea why that pops in my head.
Right.
But so I blew out the candle, and I was like, I'm just gonna go to bed. And so I slept, and I went to sleep, and it was so dark. It was beautiful. I just drifted right into sleep. And I have no idea and any time frame of what anything was, right? Just fell asleep. And then I woke up to a knock. And it kind of startled me at first. And I was like, again, no, I had no idea on time frames, but I thought it was interesting to hear a knock because I'm like, well, it didn't seem like it's been that long. And it's interesting that they would check in on me already. And so I'm like, I'm groggy. I'm like, yeah, hello. And Viv's like, feels so sweet, just like soft little voice. She's like, Adam, you're not fasting, right? We talked about you not fasting. And I'm like, no, I'm not fasting. I'm like, what day is it? It just like came out. I'm like, what day is it? And she goes, it's Monday afternoon. And I'm like, wait a minute. And in my head, I'm like, wait a minute. You went to sleep at Saturday around 9 p.m. And now she's telling you it's Monday afternoon.
Wow.
I'm like, holy fuck. Leave the food, please, because I'm just realizing I'm famished. But I hibernated. I slept for like 30 some odd hours, 36
Holy
hours,
shit,
and just
really?
like out. And so when she left the food and left, I rolled out of bed, put some clothes on, and my entire body was just so sore. Like I'd been detoxing the entire time, whether it was like trauma detoxing, medicine detox, whatever it was, but I was fucking sore. And my bed wasn't like, it didn't feel sticky, it didn't feel like I was sweating, but my body was so sore. Like I stood up and I'm like, yoga teacher, I know how to do this, right? I couldn't even look down, let alone reach down.
Yeah.
Like I looked down and with my chin and my whole backside of my body was like, get fucked, man. No, you can't do any of this. So I did some foam rolling, I drank some water and got some food in me, and body started to open up. And it kind of set into my practice. I'm like, okay, you got a rough understanding. It's Monday afternoon. Start your practices. And so I sat down, started meditating, doing my mantras, going through my breath work, stuff like that. And it was, so I had 5 mantras roughly that I worked with. I tried to do them what I thought was maybe 2 times a day. So I was doing about 1,000 mantras a day. I have a mala that I do my mantras with. And so I was doing, I went through like the first 4 mantras that I work with. And these are all mantras that I use in my sound baths. I use with clients. So these are ones that I've like sat with for years, for when I did seat them in my practice, it was either 45 or 90 days every single day, 108 times, like really intimately getting to know these mantras. And so I was looking forward to this as like refresh, right? There's an opportunity for you to do this again. And so I was going through the first couple mantras, and then the Gayatri mantra, the long form one, is one that I use, especially in my sound baths. But when I create containers, Mama Gayatri is just something that's really called to me, and for whatever reason. And I always feel very like just strong when I chant this mantra, and it's that freight train mantra. It's almost like it takes. Like one recitation of that mantra takes about 30 to 40 seconds, right? So 108 times, we're in this one for a while, like 45 minutes to an hour. And so by this time, I had already been chanting for 4 hours probably. And I get to the Gayatri mantra, and the 4th recitation, I just start sobbing. And like everything starts to release, right? Everything. And it wasn't like this, woe is me, pity me, sad. It was like all of the stuck shit that I was just holding on to. Like the sad look in my daughter's eyes when I told her I couldn't come visit her for whatever fucking stupid reason I made up because I was a selfish fucking dad, right? The bloated look of my mom as she passed away, not looking like my mom, right? The 8.5-year relationship that just fell apart. Like all this shit was just like just sobbing. Still doing the mantra, Om Bur, Om Bhuva, Om Swaha, Om Maha, Om Jana, Om Tapa, just like, just weeping. made me get emotional now talking about it.
Mm.
And again, like while I'm doing this mantra and while I'm just like feeling this like beautiful release, like this, it felt so good to cry and to sob and to just let it go. My, again, I'm still chanting. My life kind of zoomed out into this like Buddhist painting called a Tonka. Have you heard of those? They're mandala esque in the fact that there is balance to them, but they're
Mm-hmm.
not like the geometric, the sacred geometry mandalas.
Mm-hmm.
I'll just pull it up real quick. But they just so you can get a reference. But they usually depict stories in some kind of way, right? And it's like battles or these cool like just ideas that kind of move through Buddhism and like the Jataka tales and shit like that.
Mm.
And so my life kind of opened up into this like beautiful Tonka, and I could see like all of life, all of the way that my life like presented itself, right? Um, in this non-time linear fashion, which is a way that I've read that a lot of the indigenous cultures look at time as this kind of like this melting pot of things that you can just pull from instead of right to left, top to bottom,
Mm-hmm.
whatever shit. And so my life opened up in this Tonka, and I could see everything, and it was this overwhelming idea that like you created this life with a very, very, very intentionally, right? I can argue that my previous life, I just kind of followed the bouncing ball and it landed where it was, even though I know I'd made a lot of those decisions myself. I
Yeah.
could argue with myself and say, no, I just found myself into this alcoholic restaurant fucking manager, bullshit fucking life that I wasn't happy with, even though I know that's not true. But I very consciously built this current life that I'm living, right? Because I wanted to have time to be with my kids. I wanted to have time to do cool shit like this and talk to good fucking people and put it out into the world to, the whoever wants to listen to it, to
Right.
be able to help people, release their intoxications instead of get them more responsibly drunker for some fucking corporate bigwig to make a more big fucking bonus, right? Like
Right.
I purposefully made this life. And so, yes, it's still going to be stressful at times, but there's so much joy in what I've created. And again, this isn't an egoic thing. Like we're all the proprietors of our own life. We've all created it. It's
Right.
just that I finally realized it within myself. And so like, okay, clean up this mess over here, maybe rebuild this thing that's going on here. So it's not perfect life, but it's a life that I can see that I've made and I've got a lot of pride in. Oh, that's beautiful. Yeah.
I have an entire book of those, and that was, oh, I didn't realize that
This
was a
is
video
moving.
I just sent you.
Yeah.
Um, what is it called? A Tonka?
Tonka.
Tonka.
Yeah.
It's that book is like up to my leg. It's like huge, and
Mm.
it's all sorts of stories of the goddesses, the Buddhist goddesses, and
Yeah.
the Tonkas. Yeah. Um, yeah. What I'm hearing is like such a beautiful catch up, really, with yourself,
Yeah.
right? Like,
Yeah.
I like that you shared that it gave you an opportunity. You had all of these practices set up to be able to do, but then you got to see which ones still called to your heart, which ones were going to be nourishing.
Right.
And also, you know, did you feel, no, that's not the way I want to ask the question. Was there anything that you realized, and this is a bit of a projection that I'm questioning you through, is there anything that you realized that you had been doing because you thought if you didn't, X, Y, or Z would happen?
That's a really good question. Um, I think I'm still figuring that answer out.
Yeah.
I did have some nice realizations of things that I have chosen to let go of that I've been questioning that kind of made sense in the darkness.
Mm.
Not to say that like this podcast, for example. Like I used to do weekly releases every week when there's a new podcast coming out, and I have a second podcast that was every other week. So I was putting out like was that 75, almost 80 episodes a year. I don't make money at this. This is a passion project, and I love doing it. It's a passion project, and it's the passion for a reason. But I found myself being stressed out about it. So why am I stressing myself out? Is there a way that I can approach this differently to where I can still accomplish the goal of what I wanted to do without spending this time that is very valuable, that could be not directed to something else because of monetary value, but just, just looking at things, right?
But why not?
But why not? Exactly, right? And so dialed it back from every week. Now we're due every other week. So I went from 52 episodes to 26.
Yeah.
That's a lot of time to just like free up. And I'm my own boss. I'm my own producer. I'm my own director. I'm my own creative talent. Like, it's all me.
Yeah.
So who am I going to offend? Like, thankful all the listeners that do listen to this show, but I'm not getting any hate mail for dropping down to 2 episodes a month instead of 4.
Right.
Right. And so, a lot of that stuff is, it gave me an opportunity to really sit down and ask me those honest questions without some kind of external filter coming in, and to be able to, there was a lot of honesty. It was almost like I was waiting for myself to very clearly talk to myself and to just like give myself some honest answers, that I maybe didn't think I was going to be ready for in the past, or maybe I haven't given myself enough credit to think that like this version of me is mentally more stable to handle some of these things that we need to talk about. That maybe like I feel like in my medicine journeys, I feel like there's this big rope-a-dope kind of thing that happens at times in my medicine journeys where it's like, hey, we're going to show you this dancing bear and this fractal pattern, and you're going to meet some things and you're going to have some really cool experiences. But at the same time, that without you knowing it, but you kind of do know it, we're pumping you full of this other information. We're pumping you full of this other healing kind of shit, right? And it's like, look over here, get that in there while he's not looking, and it's like, it's not like it, it's not like they don't trust me with the information. I don't feel that. It doesn't feel like, sometimes it feels like this is the way that your body needs to learn. It's not by this cognitive, well, you're going to read a book or you're going to watch this thing. This is like osmosis kind of idea.
Yeah.
So it was cool to like create some space to really kind of check in with the self with that. But then also have those experiences happen in those DMT states for me also, which was very cool because I wasn't sure how that was going to manifest for me, or if, right? And what I'm speaking to is the just the body chemistry that happens naturally. I didn't take a DMT pin in there with me or anything like that. But after about 20 hours of complete darkness for your eyes and for your body starts to think it's asleep. So your endogenous DMT that naturally creates within the body, which we think scientists are pretty sure it creates more when we are asleep than when we are awake. But there's a lot of tests being done with that now. But your endogenous DMT overcreates, so you have the ability to go into waking dream states, either with my eyes open, or the way they manifested for me was in dreams. And I don't dream. I haven't dreamt in years, at least not that I remember. And I thought that like when I quit drinking, the dreams would come back. And maybe one could argue that because I smoke weed every day, probably don't dream. I could argue with that. Get it? But I had the most amazing dreams and the most amazing dream experience. And it was so fun. And I don't know, man. It was so after my hibernation experience and after my sobbing and crying and emotional release and all this beautiful things that happened, I was like, I don't know what day it is, or I don't know what time it is, but I need to go back to sleep. Even though I just slept for 30 some odd hours, I need to go back to sleep. And so I got back in bed and I closed my eyes, not expecting anything, just closed my eyes. And I, looking back, I can feel myself moving in towards sleep. And I remember seeing a gold frame and a sledgehammer in the middle of it. And I don't know what that means, if there's any meaning. I worked at Red Hook and we had framed sledgehammers all around the fucking restaurant. I don't know if there's any tie to that. But for me, it was like, wait a minute, I can see that. Like, I remember saying that. Wait a minute, I can see that. And then all of a sudden, I'm in a movie theater. and the screen is the frame and the sledgehammer, and then like 10 rows in front of me, after I say, wait a minute, I can see that, a being stands up and says like, hey, you can see that. And I'm like, hey, I can see you. And they're like, I can see you. And I'm like, I know you. And it was one of the beings that presents themselves in my medicine journeys, mainly my psilocybin journeys. And it was like, oh my God, you're here.
Yeah.
And it was this immediate, it was like, hey, we're always here.
Yeah.
You can only understand that we're here at certain times, but we're always here. It's like your spiritual family, right? Your ancestors, your guides, right? They're always there,
Yeah.
right? You know, like every once in a while, I'll just like start throwing up like high fives and be like high-fiving the ancestors, right? You know, they're always there. They're just hanging out, right?
Yeah.
And so, and it just immediately turned into one of my medicine journeys. And so like he grabbed my hand or they grabbed my hand and we started frolicking through my dreams. And it was again, that rope-a-dope. We're showing you shit. We're pumping you full of shit over here. And it was very lucid-esque, right? I could very much interact with the dreams. I remember being shown like styles of art that I've never seen, that probably have never been birthed before.
Wow.
But they were just like, look at this and look at that. And I'm like, oh my God, like it's so overwhelming. And I would wake up and like, I'm not done, and go back in and I pick right back up.
Yeah.
And again, this is all brand new to me. Like this is stuff I've read about. I've got friends that can lucid dream and I like drool and salivate over their stories. I'm like, tell me more. And you turn left and you did, and you thought about looking up and you did. Like, oh my God. So had a just night after night after night. Every time I shut my eyes, dreams happening, good stuff.
Did you feel rested when you woke up?
Yes, very much so. Very much so, which is interesting because even though I don't remember my dreams, I wake up feeling exhausted on a regular basis, feeling like I've trekked through, and I know I make these references a lot, the Lord of the Rings references, but I feel like I've been trekking through Mordor. Like I've like on a quest of some sort, like climbing over boulders and doing shit and fighting people and stuff. And I wake up and I'm like, I'm fucking tired. Don't remember shit.
Yeah.
But the last night, so I lost track of time. I don't remember. I thought it was like a Wednesday evening, and I hadn't checked in on days since I hibernated. So but I was, for some reason, I was, ego confident about like, okay, I know what day it is. It's like Wednesday night. So, okay, Thursday, I got all day Thursday, and then I come out Friday. Okay, cool. I got like 4 more meals. I got, a day and a half. I got this. And then Viv dropped off food for whatever day it was. And I was like, hey, just to check in, like, what day is it? And she's like, Tuesday morning. And I'm like, what? Wow. Tuesday morning? I'm a whole day and a half off. Like, how the fuck did that? And then in my head, I'm like, is she fucking with me? Do they do that? Would they do that to fuck with, just to get me out of my own thing? Because I asked. I'm like, and then so like the panic hit and all this shit, right? And it was fun to kind of experience through those like panic moments and all that fun stuff.
What does that feel like for you?
Panic? Mm-hmm. It constricted my chest. Mm-hmm. So I dealt with asthma as a kid, and so there's like a lot of breathway constriction when I go into panic, tightness in the chest, and it was interesting to feel the emotion, to be witness to the emotion, to know that I didn't want that emotion present, to feel myself try to push it down without understanding it, and then to release and accept it, and to let it be, to let it come up, because it's like it needed to come up to understand that it didn't need to be there. Right. And you need I needed to give it the opportunity to tell its story, to look around and be like, oh no, we're fine.
Right.
But it happened. And I don't know how long it was there for. It could have been 10 minutes, could have been an hour. Right. I have no idea.
What I'm curious about is, what is the story that comes up for you in the panic? Like, if you were to ask the fear, what is it saying to you?
It's, for me, it's lack of control. I didn't know what day it was. I didn't know what time it was. I didn't know how much longer I had left in there. All of the things that I would need to feel safe, that I think that I need to feel safe, the details were not there.
Yeah.
And I look back at my life, and I'm like, I have social anxiety. So when my fiance and I would go out, to parties or to friends' houses and stuff, I'm like, okay, how long are we going to be there? When do we leave? Who's going to be there? All these questions that I felt like I needed to answer to appease the anxiety within me. Mm-hmm. But do I really need to do that, or is that just the muscle memory? Is that my knee-jerk reaction, which kind of is, There's a double-edged sword with that, because there is information that can make me feel more at ease if I do have it. But if I don't have it,
Mm-hmm.
you don't have everything you need. You're not always going to have that. So how do we find the peace with that? And it's like releasing the expectation of the control that I feel like I need to have to be able to maneuver through these situations.
Yeah.
And it's a lot of those, like, I think I had a lot of, there's still unpacking with that to go, but that's something that really pulled a lot of threads, is being able to listen to those true stories and
Mm-hmm.
like listen to the true answers that come from them,
Yeah.
and to be able to have the time to process and not like, okay, fuck, I just like picked this scab and now it's bleeding and now fuck, I got to put a band-aid on and go pick the kids up from where the fuck they are and then be a mom or be a dad or be a fucking brother or be a spouse and then like, okay, tend to that scab later. Okay, well, I'll get to it later. When the fuck is later? Right? We
Right.
don't delineate when later is, right? And so like, we open to talking about doing hard shit. It's like sometimes we got to put later on the map.
Yeah.
Like later's got to happen to deal with the grief, to deal with the shit that you're maybe not wanting to deal with at that point in time. It's going to come up if you
Yeah.
don't deal with it later, right? So might as well like set aside some later time for you.
Well, and that's, I would say, one of the chronic conditions of our culture is priority,
Mm-hmm.
right? And I think any child who grew up as a latchkey kid
Hmm.
understands that that's one of our core wounds as a generation. Like, whether or not it's valid, right?
Right.
And I know some people may be like, what does that mean? Um, my teacher taught me that my worth is not established by whether my parents were there or not there, right? But to a child's mind, particularly a child that lives in a culture that's told if your parents aren't there, then something is wrong,
Mm-hmm.
right? But you go to other parts of the world where children aren't even raised with their parents, right? And they can still be happy
Completely
because they
fine.
live in a community where they're taught that it's okay to be happy
Right.
and that you'll see your mom and dad in, 6 weeks when they get back from whatever they're doing, wherever they're working, right?
Yeah.
But Americans, we've been taught no, like your worth is established by who shows up for you.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where that line of questioning was like, I know where fear comes up for me, and I can experience that sense of abandonment in all sorts of
Yeah.
spaces, right? Like, and I think that like when I think of the darkness, that is like I told you when I'm in medicine space, like that's my fear is like I don't know what time it is
Yeah.
because somehow by knowing what time, like I remember my my hero's journey, which I didn't know exactly how much I was taking that day.
Didn't know it was going to be a hero's journey.
I did not. Bless my sweet friends. I was one of their people that they were just starting with, and I trusted them.
Right.
Right. I trusted them, and that was enough for me to, go in. I knew how approximately how long it was going to take. And I'm sure they've probably learned since then to not allow the person who's going into the journey to have their phone in the room because I kept trying to pick up my phone to check what time it was. And then I would be like, what is in my hand?
Right. Exactly.
And I was the I was a problem
Jesus.
child. I wouldn't wear my blindfold. I convinced them to let me go outside. It was a whole thing. But the anxiety that kept coming in for me was based on the belief that I was going to go crazy and not be able to show up for my kids.
Yeah.
Why do you think that might be a fear of mine?
Right.
Right? Because I was the little girl who didn't have the parents show up for them on time
Right.
or in a time when I really needed them.
Yeah.
Or what I would say to myself in response to that when I thought that I needed them. Because the truth is I didn't need them.
Right. Yeah.
I am here and I'm okay. And I've always had truth and spirit and God and love and all the things and all of the angels who were there, even if they weren't always perfect.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
And so when I come face to face with myself in those spaces, it's really coming face to face with all of the lies that I've adopted
Right.
and how much they have controlled my mental being, my emotional being, and ultimately even my physical being, because that also persuades me to either show up or don't,
Hmm.
right?
Yeah.
So the question that I had asked you before this last bit of conversation was, was there anything that you realized you didn't need to do? And that projection came from me realizing how many times I was pushing myself over an edge just to prove how strong I am.
Right. Right.
And I've sat with that around whether or not I'll ever want to do certain medicine again, right?
Right.
That hero's journey was my first big journey with psilocybin. And the more recent one was about half that dose, an attempt to find a medium or a middle ground, right? I like to talk about the Goldilocks spot.
Right.
And I might as well have taken 5 grams
Right.
because I had just as deep of an experience. And so, what I know about myself and what I hear from a lot of people now with medicine is you're going to have the experience you're supposed to have, regardless of how much you take.
Exactly.
With the setting and intention,
Hmm.
I think this is where the magic of the power of the mind really speaks and is validated. So my intentions were no lighter or less on this other journey. The dose was very different.
Right.
And I still got to face that fear and that anxiety. I also got to wake up to the very truth of my last birth was a traumatic birth. And I'd never considered that up
Right.
until this. My youngest is almost 12, and this last journey was less than a year ago. So I've had plenty of time to acknowledge that his birth was very traumatic, and
Hmm.
it was like nowhere present in my consciousness, my psyche, modern psyche.
Yeah.
And so I got to revisit that. I actually went through what felt like contractions and birthing pains, which
Mm.
ended up turning into a large amount of releasing into the toilet,
Yeah. Yeah.
some deep purging. But it was after that ceremony that I started to question, why do I keep putting myself in positions like you were speaking to about going to a hot yoga class? Maybe that's somebody's edge that they say, this is too much for me. And where I go from there, which is part of the question and the line of questioning that I was kind of bringing out, was the motivation. Why do I show up for the hot yoga class?
Mm.
Why do I show up for a darkness retreat? Why do I show up for a medicine ceremony? And each time that I've come out of these hard things, that reflection is so important. But what I'm finding more important is that I take the answers that I gather from those questions and I bring them with me,
Hmm.
and I integrate them and I embody them. And so today, I don't push myself in that same way,
Yeah.
right? There was 2 amazing concerts going on through Wycelium this weekend. Have you heard of Wycelium?
Mm-mm.
So they're an organization local to Seattle, and they put on a lot of really cool stuff. A lot of their events are through the Abbey Arts Center in Seattle. And this last weekend, it was Parengi
Mm.
and Yaima.
Okay.
Parengi played on Friday, and Yaima was on Saturday. And in between, and all day Friday, well, it was, I think, an evening thing into the night for Parengi. And then it was like an all day thing on Saturday with sound baths and breath work. And, they have vendors there that are doing like really healthy foods and mocktails and, shrubs and just cool stuff, right? Live art. I wanted to go.
Yeah.
I wanted to go. And I had the longest work day on Friday that I've probably had in maybe 5 years.
Mm.
I had clients booked back to back from 10 a.m. until 6:30 p.m.
Woo.
I don't do that shit to myself.
Yeah. Yeah.
Part of it was I was out of town for 11 days.
Mm-hmm.
So I was doing a little bit of makeup. Part of it was I tracked my cycle and I knew where I was going to be in my moon time.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought, I'll have a good amount of energy that day. I'll be okay. Right? So conscious choosing. And yet I was like, do not say yes to this concert, right? The
Yeah.
FOMO in me, the socialite is like, all the people are going to be there. And I love, oh my God, have you seen Parengi
No,
live?
I've not. No, I imagine it'd be
Oh,
amazing.
so I hope to get him out if he's ever listening, and all the listeners. We've got some work to do of getting our concert series going. I don't know if we're going to get anything going this summer because money.
Right. Right.
I'm like, I could go on a tangent there, but I'll stay here. We would love to get Pernangi out to Wild Nature Retreat Center and Amphitheater because his shows are just phenomenal.
Yeah.
He's an incredible artist, and his beloved partner, they just put this, it's a workshop concert, right? So they have you come in, they have you participate. He has us go through, I don't know what it's called, where like he'll section the group into four, and one group makes this noise and that group makes this noise and this and this. And then he has you go in and then he
Ah.
starts singing or chanting or performing with us as like his music. So cool.
That's amazing.
And then, of course, you know, he's a medicine man. He's journeyed. He produces incredible music for the plant medicine world.
Yeah.
And then Yaima, their group, I didn't know this until a couple of years ago, and it was kind of funny. I thought the singer, her name was Yaima. That's not it. The group is called Yaima. Her name is Pepper, and I do not remember her partners. I don't know if they're intimate partners, but
Okay.
her business partner for the group, he has a different name. And he's the one that actually produces a large amount of the music, which is incredible. Also, would love to have them out to the center. But my son had a lacrosse game on Saturday. And then on Sunday, we had a community work party come out for the center to help us because we are so behind on just even pulling weeds. Good Lord.
Right. Yeah.
Like,
It's just hard to keep up on everything.
it
Life.
is. And similar to your relationship with the podcast, I've had to ask myself, my intention of building this center was to provide a healing space for people like myself that need healing to come and be nourished. Because when I look back at like my journey, all of the places that I went held such a sacred space within me. And so I wanted to gift that back to the world and to be able to do it in a way that it was, you know, I took a lot from the 12-step world, right? Going to AA meetings as a poor person, I knew that I could go for free until I had the money to start contributing.
Right.
And what's beautiful about those practices is like people think like, well, then how do the bills get paid? And it's like, because you are so grateful for this free space that when you come into money, which is a natural progression of when you get your shit together,
Right.
you can start earning money regularly. You want to support that.
Yeah.
Right. So I took this vision of being able to hold that intention and bring it into our business model. And it hasn't really worked out that way, right? Because what I understand to be different is that, you know, the 12-step world kind of started in church basements where there was no rent,
Right.
right? The build of our retreat center didn't come without rent.
Right,
We have a
yeah.
tremendous amount of costs. And so that was a side tangent, but we had our work party, which was like so heartwarming to see such a large amount of people show up. And why that's healing for me today, and it's funny because I can feel the sentiment bubbling up in my heart, and I'm like, oh, I'm not going to cry, but it's there. Is it's still healing the facade that I carry within me that says that I was abandoned, that I had all these people show up
Yeah.
to help me, to help the center, to help the community. and that I didn't have to go sit in a dark cave for 6 days to hear it or to see it or to feel it,
Right.
right?
Yeah.
And I don't minimize the value of either of those
Mm-hmm.
experiences. But for me, at least at this phase of my life, what I've reduced or returned to myself, I'd say, in some capacity, is from feeling like I have to go skydiving to remember how to be alive.
Yeah. That's
Right.
I think that's a very strong statement. Like we've, as a society, have gotten so, like we have to create a specific place to do the thing, right? We can't just experience and appreciate the thing that happened. Like you're being surrounded by community and being able to appreciate that and see that and to recognize that that can go to some of those abandonment issues that you might have had growing up, right?
Mm-hmm.
How many times is that happening on a regular basis that we just don't put the fucking credence to understand and to notice it because we're so stupidly busy, because like we can't even realize that there's help being given, that there's nourishment, that there's community, that there's all this stuff that's around us, that's all the healing that we need.
Yeah.
And it's beautiful to be able to get to a point where you can recognize that real time. And if you can't, like that's one of the things I love about these types of practices. Like it gives you a chance to reframe.
Mm-hmm.
Like this phrase going on in my head so much. And I can't remember where I heard it initially, but I reheard it recently in an interview with Andre 3000. But it's basically the idea of like if you're trying to be too cool, right?
Mm-hmm.
If you're so cool, you're gonna freeze.
Oh, yeah.
Right. It's like, and I got to have that in my head all the time, because there's part of me that doesn't want to do the silly thing, that doesn't want to sing in public, that doesn't feel comfortable dancing, and it's like, why? I know people aren't sitting there pointing and laughing at me. There might be some like, you know, life is funny. People are going to notice shit that's different and funny and weird, right? And that doesn't mean that it's like it's on you, right? Because you're the impetus for the funny weird thing, right? Maybe it's circumstantial around like a story that you just reminded because of the way that you do whatever, right? It doesn't. It's kind of like reframing it and understanding like what those true stories are that are going on, right? And for me, this was a good opportunity for that, to where I can, create that space and separate myself and just really kind of like listen to what's going on, so that when I'm faced with this in a real time situation, I can notice it and I can appreciate it, or I can act in kind, like, community coming out to help with the pulling the weeds and shit, right? One of the things
Which was
with
probably one of the least amount of things that got done, which is totally fine. But we did some massive, it
yeah.
was insane. 10 to 3. And I don't know how many people showed up, but we did it, like Mona and Kevin, they literally filled our entire woodshed. Like, Kevin's a big dude.
He's a big dude.
But he also has back injury. And so I was conscious of my codependently checking in on him and making sure he wasn't injuring
Yeah.
himself. I'm like, he's a grown man. He can decide for himself.
Right. Yeah.
But yeah, I think, like you were saying, that there are constant opportunities or reminders of the truth.
Mm-hmm.
And what I hear, even in your sharing, if I'm going to poke you and point it out a little bit, you've said it a few times where you want to dismiss your ego when you are validating your experience. And, we've talked a lot about Ram Dass, and it's about you like loving that side, right?
Yeah.
And I actually watched another almost said dopamine of all things, another which I'm sure was hit documentary. And why I wanted to say the other word is because it's called Dosed.
Okay.
And it's got Rick Rubin, Gabor Mate. Oh, there's somebody else in there. Paul Stamets.
Okay. Yep.
And it's about this. There's a couple a couple episodes, but the one that we watched is about the woman who had colon cancer. And why was I just talking about that? What were we talking about right before that?
Oh,
The ego.
Ego. Yep.
Ram Dass.
Yep.
I still got to figure out why I brought that up.
You mentioned that I had mentioned kind of dismissing my ego or validating my ego.
Right? I'll pull it in somehow.
Yeah.
So, why that's impressionable for me in what we were talking about is like, how do we befriend the ego and understand? Oh, there it is. Okay, so Gabor is talking to her towards the end of this. I won't give anything away, but the end of this episode that they had recorded. And she says, you know, I'm a 54-year-old woman who's still afraid of what her parents think of her. And he said, don't feel bad for feeling bad. Be grateful that you care, right? And for me, there's a yes and,
Right.
right? If it becomes manipulative or obligatory, and what she was referring to is like, you know, how she's now living her most authentic life. And so when I hear you sharing and then wanting to say, this isn't coming from a place of my ego, it's like, well, it is because we're
Right.
talking about it,
Yeah.
but that it's okay because like you said before, I don't know if we were recording or it'll be part of this podcast, but I was talking about, you know, tooting my own horn, and I dismissed myself. I was like, not to toot my own horn. And you were like, toot, toot, sister.
Right.
Like, it's
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah.
It's like, you know, it's so easy for us to do that for each other.
Right. And it's hard for us to do it for ourselves.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And to understand why it's hard,
Yeah.
because we say that we're afraid of how others may judge us, right? So say you're dancing like a fool and being weird on the dance floor and you catch somebody pointing at you. What do you think's going to happen?
Yeah.
Right? The only reason why we feel triggered by somebody's opinion is because we believe it's true.
Right. Yeah. Totally.
And so when we know that it's not true, and it's funny too, another side tangent, when you started saying weird, do you watch or have you watched New Girl?
Oh yeah. Love that. Yeah.
So in our family now, at random,
Yeah.
somebody will be like, weird, weird,
Yeah.
weird,
Yeah.
weird, right? And it's become like the most fun thing for us as a family to like embody
Yeah.
the quirkiness that Jess has and Jess and Nick particular, right? Like, oh my God, to just be in our truest, most authentic, joyful expressions that is often childlike.
It really is. Yeah.
Like, that was a thought that came to me during class this morning, and I was I was sharing it with my husband on my drive home, audio messaging him, and I was like, why is it so hard for me to put all this wisdom into words sometimes? And I was like, I start thinking in like social media post language, like how would I share this to the world? And it was like something like this of, it's hard to be joyful in a world that is determined to keep us miserable, but we can do hard things, right? I know Glennon Doyle was the one that wrote that book and
Yeah.
kind of preached that song. And that's why it's so important for us to band together in community.
Right.
It's like, if I live amongst other people who are cheerleading my joy, who are cheerleading the tooting of my own horn, that are comforting me in my loving version of my ego, right? Not the one that's like, be afraid, like, what was that movie? Never Not Be Afraid. The group, oh my God.
I don't think I know that one.
It's the cartoon of the caveman.
Oh, the Krugs?
Krugs.
Krugs, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Nick Cage was the head caveman.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, totally,
Right. Their
yeah.
mantra at the beginning was never not be afraid. Like that's the version of my ego that I'm constantly comforting and saying, honey, you're safe. You're okay. And what I've been teaching one of my clients as of lately is the option to believe, which is a choice, that my death is already planned through whatever karmic contract I signed coming into this body.
Right.
And so I can't prevent it and I can't cause it. So I may as well live on being the most ridiculous, joyful, authentic version of myself. And yes, there's war happening. There's starvation, there's poverty, there's racism, There's things going on in this world that we couldn't even fathom. And we're not meant to if we're not in it.
Yeah.
My job is to do my own healing and to continue to show up as a loving presence amongst my community and my world. And that doesn't mean that I don't advocate or I don't stand up for something, especially if that's my calling.
Right.
Right? Like,
Right.
I've definitely had to sit with myself on that one because I was a louder advocate for everybody else before I learned how to advocate for myself.
Right. Yeah.
And that was part of my sickness. And so, anyway, that was a long-winded way of saying, like, love your ego,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And if there's fear of judgment, turn that gaze inward.
Yeah.
And looking at, what does it say about you if you want to start collecting money, which I already fucking talked to you about last 2 times I saw you. You should be earning money for your podcast. They are brilliant. People love them. They talk about them all the time, right? So that was one of the first things that I set up, which I'm like, now I should share that program with you that I signed up for. You know, taking sponsors, like
Yeah.
getting commercials on here, people that, you know, even like when I was looking at doing it, I reached out to my immediate community and I said, hey, if I start a podcast, would you want to pitch in and have a commercial? And right away, I had like a handful of people that were like, yes, I would love that, promoting their businesses.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, what I saw in your share is, you know, that fear of valuing it through the channel of money because how we've been conditioned as spiritual teachers and facilitators that, you know, those who lived in a community and were fed and housed and clothed,
Yeah.
they didn't have to make money, but we don't live in that world.
Yeah. I don't know. There's a part of me that goes back and forth with that idea with this, and it with this podcast in general. But there's so much of my previous life has been grow, draw. You know, here's the blueprints. Fucking build it, right?
Right.
And grow more than last year. Do better, right? And there's part of me that does not want to have anything to do with that, with this at all. As much as I would love to see success and would love to have checks coming in for this, there's a fear in me that if I have sponsors, then they'll have expectations and I'll have to put more into it. When this is just, I heard an analogy a little while back, and it landed really beautifully with me. And you know, there's the basic way that this person put it was, you know, like looking at your life as a you know, construction site.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, blueprint, you know, where the foundation's going, you know, the walls, the windows, all that shit. You build it, you know exactly what it's going to look like. It's a way to go. You can look at life like a garden, right? You have soil that you've made sure is cultivated, right? And you put the seeds where you want to. You water, make sure there's water. You make sure it's fertilized. You make sure there's sun. But you can't dictate how it grows. It's going to grow the way it wants to. You can prune, right? So you can kind of manipulate a little bit, but you can't make it say, yeah, there was a flower right here. I want a flower there, right? Mm-hmm. And so I've kind of taken that on as an idea for this podcast of just letting it be what it needs to be. Like not putting any monetary value on it, not putting any like financial constraints on it. To just let it truly do what it needs to do, right? And again, like I would love to, like if it became monetary, that'd be great. But like, there's part of it too that like I'm done with that part of life, right? Mm-hmm. You know, there's money that comes in other places that support me in a very beautiful way that allow me to put time away to do this stuff. That, you know, I'm afraid like by no means would I expect to be, you know, a household name like a Joe Rogan or an Aubrey Marcus or like a Modern Wisdom or something like that. But there is a fear, I would say, that like if at any point I got to that, it would become a job. And it would become something that I'm like, oh, I gotta go do this fucking podcast now, and it's not something I'd be excited about again, you know. And
I hear that. Yeah.
So, you know, and that's something I've got to like keep track of and keep fresh in my mind, you know, to see if that's, you know, if I'm talking myself out of this stuff or if that's actually a true story, you know, if that's a true realization that I have.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's tough.
I
It's
get
tough.
that. And it's interesting hearing you share that as feedback because it illuminates what I think I've been a little bit in paralysis around with the retreat center.
Mm,
And of course, immediately I'm already like in generator mode because that's my human design.
yeah.
And I'm like, well, what if you just put up a link and ask for donations from your listeners? And why I'm even bringing that to light is because I just heard you talk about your utter exhaustion.
Yeah.
And what I know for me is that's a huge reason why I reconstructed my business the way that I did. And it's also why I sometimes teeter on that financial line of just surviving. And it's a huge trigger for my nervous system,
Right.
right? And I share this pretty openly with, people that are close in our community, but we've been drowning since we built the center.
Mm,
And there's been talks of seeking sponsorship, and I haven't been able to put my finger on like, why does that feel stressful? And you just said, because then there's this expectation to produce X amount of whatever.
right.
And I hadn't considered that. What I felt yesterday with producing a day of community service was what I remember feeling when I was a sponsor in AA.
Mm,
It's like just being free of service, right?
Right.
Like I got to give my time and energy to someone who needed it and there was no money involved. And I want to learn how to embody that and integrate that same sensation even when there's large sums of money being traded for my time.
right.
Because again, if I'm honest about the world that I live in today, we live in one of the most expensive parts of the world. Like, it's insane how much it costs to
Yeah.
live where we are.
Uh-huh.
And, I have a dear, dear friend of mine right now who's at the risk of losing their entire home and property because her husband's company dissolved this last year. And the industry is really, really competitive. And she's now looking at living in a conscious community, which that was kind of part of our dream when
Right.
we had first envisioned what our space was going to be. It was, moving multiple people onto the property.
Mm-hmm.
We weren't able to buy enough property to make that work.
Right.
But coming back to, what do I need? What do you need in our businesses to support us in the way to be able to live a life where we're not exhausted, right? My big aha a while ago now, but a few months back, I think, was I built a healing center that is now triggering my unresolved trauma.
Isn't it funny how that's just like exactly how it's supposed to happen?
And it makes me want to cry and laugh and cackle all at the same time where it's like, how ridiculous.
And just like thinking back to of like how many clients you've sat across from that echo everything that you need to be working on that you're telling them and you're giving advice for. Like, oh, I should take this advice for myself.
Oh,
And
yeah.
then all of a sudden, like, here's a healing center. Now it's even bigger, like echoing back. It's like, fuck.
Yeah. And you think about birthing a business. It
Yeah.
is similar to birthing a baby. It becomes this giant mirror that's walking around that you are forced into those hard places to grow and evolve.
Yeah.
And we as a society judge those who bail on those agreements. And sometimes that is actually the most loving thing that we can do.
Yeah.
Even if it's a parent leaving a child,
Yep.
right? And I had many of those conversations with myself and with my children when their dad and I separated. It was, hey, the world's going to possibly treat you like something really bad has happened in your life at this time. And I want you to know that you get to decide whether or not that's true.
Yeah.
And, it's been a few years now, and my children will report that, yeah, it was really hard, but they actually see how much happier we are now. And it's not to say that they won't be still talking about it in therapy now or in 20 years.
Mm-hmm. But I think that's part of it too, is like we have, I think, created too much of an opportunity to lean into what we perceive as trauma, right? It's become like a crutch. It's become
Yeah.
an excuse. It's become this like, I'm it's kind of become like a voluntary victimhood, right?
Oh
Like
yeah.
if I become a victim, then people will care for me and take care of me. If I lean into the marginalization of where I'm at, whether it's the gender I represent at or the color of my skin or whatever it is, and I'm not saying that there isn't valid validity to stuff, these things, but there is this big push towards like the more of the victim I am, the less accountability I got to take for myself, the more support I'm going to get, the more I'm going to feel held, which we need support, we need to feel held, we need community. It just now we're seeing the extremes that people will go to feel that, right?
Well, and just what we were talking about a few minutes ago is like how many people in your life, well, let me even back up to that. When do we publicly announce our celebrations and then who actually responds and cheerleads us?
Right.
Like you look at a Facebook post of somebody saying, I'm so excited, I just graduated, blah, 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 with this, that, or the other. See how many people commented, liked, or responded to it versus I lost my job, I'm about to lose my house, I just got diagnosed with this thing. Then look at see how many people have commented and responded to it.
Right. Yeah.
We are conditioned, and I want to go back to the primal essence of who we are. You see somebody fall down and smack their knee on the ground, we run, right? Like we come to rescue for so many reasons,
Right.
right? So it's innate and instinctual in us to respond to the wounded. And as human beings, we're being asked to evolve.
Right.
So can we start tooting our horns, owning the celebratory aspects of our egos, sharing it with people, and cheering each other on, and getting over our envy, right? Like compersion.
Right.
Can I be happy for you in your joy?
Yeah.
And I will say I struggle with that sometimes.
Oh yeah, it's very hard. Yeah.
Particularly if I see people being rewarded for variations of work that I do that I don't feel that I get rewarded for. That's a hard one for me to admit out loud.
Yeah.
But
No, but I think we got to admit it to know that there's work to be done around it. Like if you don't admit it, then you're missing the step, right?
yeah. Well, and like you said, part of that healing for me has been getting over this idea that I need to be Layla Martin or Mama Gina or Esther Perel
Right.
to be valued and seen as a reputable educator, when really all I want to do is sit and have conversations and help really truly hold up a mirror to their own light and celebrate and cheer them on, empower them in the most redonkulous of ways, right? I want people to I want to be those little kids who give no fucks.
Yeah.
Right?
Well, there's a book I read a long time ago, Nicole LaPera wrote called How to Do the Work. And I think she was talking about how the most well-adjusted human beings are toddlers because you'll always know exactly how they feel. They're not hiding it. If
Yeah.
they're fucking happy, their shirts off, they're pantless, they're running around, joy, belly hanging out. If they're pissed, they're going to be throwing shit. You're going to know they're pissed, right? They're sad, they're crying, right? But then they're not living in those emotions. It's like this, like, hey, guess what? I'm elated again. Hey, there's a fucking micro machine. Let's go play with that shit, right? And it's we can take a lot from that. It's like, the gazelle that just got chased by the fucking tiger and then it gets away. It doesn't sit there and lament about almost being eaten. Be like, oh my God, I'm going to sit by this river and just like pout and be like, oh, life is sad. And it's like,
And
no.
never go back into that valley
Right.
again.
It shakes its little fucking tail feathers and does its little thing, gets its anxiety out, and then trots off and it's a fucking gazelle again, right?
Yeah.
It's like, and this is something that came to me and right before my darkness experience, I had this big realization that I've just been a people pleaser my whole life. And I could trace it back to an understanding of a conversation I had with my dad as a child. My dad was a coast-to-coast truck driver. He was gone for months and months and months at a time, and then we'd be home for a weekend and then gone for months at a time. 3 boys at home. My mom is a fucking saint of a woman trying to do her best to raise these 3 fucked up, fucking rambunctious kids.
Right.
And then we'd fuck shit up, and make dad or make mom pissed off. And this is like early 90s style. So like car phones had just become a thing, right? And truck drivers had them because they had to get, in touch with people. And so my mom would, we'd piss mom off, and we're maybe like 10 at the time, 10, 12, and 8, something there. And mom would be like, I'm calling your dad, get the
Yep.
face and get the fucking, your dad's going to yell at you, you motherfuckers. And then get dad on the phone, and then dad would be like, and she's like, here's your dad, angry face, shove the phone in your face. And then dad would get on the phone, and we'd be like brace for like the angry yell. And dad would just say, what the fuck are you doing?
Yeah.
I'm 1,000 miles away. I can't do anything. Quit pissing your mom off.
Right.
And he said, play politics. Do me a favor. Just play politics. Just tell her what she wants to hear. Doesn't matter if you agree with her or not.
Oh.
Just tell her what she wants to hear. Just nod and smile, right? Got it, Dad. Salute. We can do that. And I don't know how my brothers took that, but I took that to fucking heart, and like I placated to every single person from then on and didn't really have a personality. And had weight issues growing up. I didn't really have a lot of friends. I did find some friend groups, and we had, good times, a lot of drugs involved and shit like that. But I found and I look back and I'm like, I can move fluidly from groups to groups because I know how to see what the dominant person or persona is doing. I can mimic that enough to fit in for a long enough before they find out, and then I can move to another group, right? So this whole victimhood mentality just washed over me. It's like I don't have a personality. I don't even know who I am. Are these jokes even my jokes? Is this fashion style my fashion? Blah blah blah. All this fucking tail spinning shit, right? And I sat there and I'm like, get the fuck over yourself, man. This isn't something you don't need to run and hide and be like, oh, woe is me. I'm a fucking victim because I'm a people pleaser. This is your superpower. You have found a way to maneuver between groups of people, between idea centers, between all of this shit without pissing people off, with gathering information, inputting your bits of knowledge where you can. Like, that is a superpower that you've just unlocked. Don't fucking weep in the corner about that shit. Figure out how to utilize that to the best of your abilities so that you can help people.
Yeah.
And I think that's where a lot of this comes into play, is the schedule that I hold, right? I'm used to it. I'm cool. I figured it out. Like, I planned it. I trust myself to do it. But when I tell other people, they're like, damn, you work a lot. That's fucking a lot of work. Do you take any time off? And then after a while, those ideas get into my head and be like, shit, I'm fucking working a lot. Are they my ideas? Are they things that I really feel that valuable or that fucking that strongly about? Probably not, but they've entered in now and they've colored the way that I view myself, right? And so now I'm viewing myself as a victim because I'm getting all this victim kind of feedback. And not to say that maybe I do need to look at myself and what kind of like work ethic I do have, but am I being colored now by all of this empathetic kind of like sympathy that's coming at me? Oh, you're so busy. You should take time off. Your mom just died. You just you broke up with a girlfriend. You just all this shit. You should take some time. You should integrate. You should, oh my God, maybe I should. Maybe I should do all this stuff. And oh my God, I'm only sleeping 6 hours a night. I used to sleep 3 hours a week. 6 hours a night is a fucking dream, right? So it's all perspective.
Right.
But if we don't give ourselves the time to understand that we are being influenced by a perspective, which we are, whether it's ours or somebody else's, then we continue to feel like we're the victims of life. And again, that's why I made that statement about the Tonka. Like, I can make an argument that I did not choose my previous restaurant life, that I was a victim of it, even though I very much was.
Right.
Both a victim and both a choice.
Yeah.
But this is my choice now. This is the very conscious effort that I'm making. And not to say I cannot still be a victim, but I need to understand that I'm making the choice to step towards that.
Yeah, because that's where the power comes from, to be able to make the change if you feel fit. And that's, I think what happens is, and I know I do this to myself too, is I enjoy it and my body starts to say otherwise, right? Like, I would die if I was sleeping 6 hours a night. I am an 8-hour minimum kind of girl.
Right.
And I also realized when I was younger, I was sleeping like 3 or 4 nights. I was partying hard. Then I had kids when I was young. And like, my nervous system is like, slow down, bitch. We do not have another eternity here, right?
Yeah.
So while my heart, I would say my spiritual center, feels limitless and wants to be of service, being gone for those 11 days, I was like, I don't do well when I'm not needed.
Yeah.
especially if I'm not going somewhere with an agenda, right? Which is what happened. And I did it intentionally. And I got to sit with myself and was like, wow, I really do find a lot of my value through my production.
Mm.
Can
Yeah.
I just be okay with that? Right?
Yeah.
When my kids, like, I'm already starting to go through a grieving process right now where my kids don't need me. And I'm like, but wait,
Yeah.
like,
Right.
I'm not ready for this. And so, taking time and going into the darkness, it's beautiful because you get to sit and, like you said, like, zoom out and have this other perspective. And what I tell my kids and what I tell my clients, and it's a reminder to myself constantly, is if somebody I love is complaining to me about my unavailability, or in the reference that I just posted on social media not long ago about an addiction or a habit, I might want to listen.
Mm-hmm.
And what I'm listening to is to myself to determine whether or not this thing that I'm doing is actually more important than this other thing that is in need of me.
Right. Yeah.
And when I say in need of me, I say that very vaguely from the terms of interdependence and not codependence. What I hear you share in response to these external judgments, it's beautiful and incredibly masculine. Like, fucking get it together, right? Yes, you are a people pleaser. I think most of us in the service industry are, and we're
Right.
all recovering to some degree.
Right. Yeah. Totally. Yeah.
Whether it's people pleasing, smoking weed, drinking plant medicine, darkness retreats, what is motivating us? Is it for deeper connection to ourselves and the world that we live in?
Right.
Or is it avoidant?
Mm-hmm.
If I'm working my ass off endlessly because I'm trying to avoid the idea that I'm worthless without it, that's what I'm going to find evidence of.
Yeah.
I will become exhausted. I will feel the judgments from X, Y, and Z. I will essentially embody that and continue to feed those parts of my brain that lead to more of that behavior. But if I'm consciously aware of it and I'm connecting to myself, the exhaustion doesn't come.
Right.
Right? There's an integrity that it's baffling, right? Like, you can go into this darkness retreat and sleep and wake up and not nearly as much time has passed, and yet you feel more rested. You can have these excitable dreams that sound like you're in the Matrix,
Right.
and you're feeling rested, right?
Yeah.
So I relate to, like, when I'm not aware of my wheels spinning, I will feel the effects of that. And here's the funny part is, if I'm so busy that I don't feel the effects through my own mind and body, then the universe will deliver me a messenger. And I might be real fucking angry about the fact that somebody's pointing it out before I go, oh shit,
Yeah.
that is relative for me right now.
Yeah. Well, and you mentioned earlier about how, doing research into these things and these experiences that pop up, right? So there's the intimate, my experiences with like plant medicine practices, energetic medicines, deep meditation, like whatever deep work you want to get into. It calls to you, right? Mm-hmm. And that calling can be from pop culture, right? Mm-hmm. That calling could be like with a lot of people that are interested in ayahuasca right now. I think it was a couple of years ago, Dr. Dre did an interview where he talked about him sitting with ayahuasca and the impact that it had on him. Aaron Rodgers, Aaron Rodgers, a quarterback for who the fuck ever right now is,
right.
had some ayahuasca experiences and talked about that publicly, right? That's going to bring it into pop culture. That's going to bring it into a forefront of people that would not have otherwise known about it, right?
Yeah.
Now, that can be the thing that somebody says, oh, because that person did it, now that makes me want to do it because I want to be like Dr. Dre and I want to make beats and shit. So if that cleared his head, then I'm just going to go do it, right?
Right.
False. Now, that brought it into your purview for a reason. Now, that story with Dr. Dre might have been like, oh, that is interesting. Okay, flag that. Let's do some more research, right? And then you do your research into it, right? Because you've been drawn into that concept for a reason, right? And so it's like that with all of this. Like it's not an accident that you learned about this thing, and then it's not saying that it can't help you.
Right.
But you doing your active research into whatever modality, whatever thing that interests you, that sparks that interest, it kind of creates the relationship with the thing that you're moving towards. And it creates a bridge, like you talked about earlier, also with the information that can be gained from that information. And it's not only, oh, this does seem like that, like say ayahuasca, right? Oh, that, doing research into this and seeing the effects and seeing what people have to say about that does seem like something I can do, right? But it's also, you're opening up the belief centers inside of you and the idea centers inside of you as to what this medicine can do, and allowing these things to like start to permeate in your subconscious and start to like noodle around, right? And so like, by no means am I saying like, I've never had a knee-jerk reaction and be like, I'm going to go sit with plant medicine tomorrow, right? I'm going to just have this urge, right? It's just going to happen, right? There's beauty in that too. But if you got to figure out your process for this shit. A lot of us don't have an intuition because we've been taught not to have one. And if you've been ignoring your body for a long time and then start to do body work and expect your body to listen, it's going to take some time because you've ignored it. It's the same kind of stuff with this. Like your intuition, it's there. It's ready to be heard, but it might take some time. You might need to do some reps, right? Some benches, some squats, right? With your fucking intention to get those muscles back from atrophy. So that first thing that just like throws your intuition into this like lit spiral of anticipation, it might not be the right thing for you. That might just be the first thing that lit your intuition up that you haven't had in a while.
Yeah, and it brings a lot of lessons along the way.
Yes, and that was interesting. And for me, in my darkness experiences, after a couple days, like I got into this very intuitive moment of like moving around the room, like how much do I trust myself to know that there's a bed there, to know that there's a dresser there, to know that this is where the water is,
right?
To have these experiences to really like, trust the self and like, oh, I thought there was a bed there. Oh no, I'm facing the wrong way. This is where the dresser is, things like that. So
I'm curious. I want to hear specifically about the finalization of your darkness, like that. I mean, that for me, when I've watched people coming out, that's like, it just conjures up so much emotion of relativity. After, I mean, I've not done a darkness experience, but the emoting that I see of the people that come out, I feel like, I know what that feels like. And so I'm curious for you, like, so the last you were talking about, you thought it was Wednesday, you thought maybe you'd have the rest of Thursday and Friday and be coming out, and you found out it was Tuesday morning. So like fast forward.
So one quick story with that real quick, because it'll lead to the last part. But so when I found out what day it truly was, and I went into my panic, and I went through that, and I was able to breathe and do all this, the idea of like, you know what to do. You know what to do. Just get out of your own way and do it. You're fine. But after I got through that, I brought it. I had a voice recorder in there with me, and I was taking some notes. But I also brought like a pen and a pad, and I figured I'd scratch some stuff down, and so I'd just finished my little panic attack. Made right with my internal emotions about where I'm at, and realized that like I'm too sore to sit. I, for some reason, didn't want to chant anymore. Nothing seemed like it felt like I was just like pouty, right? Just like, oh, nah, I'm just going to sit here. And I was sitting there and I was like twirling this pen or a pen in my fingers and just like hand in my head, like, what the fuck, man? I don't know. What am I going to do at this time? Blah, blah, blah. There's all this shit. And all of a sudden, like the pen goes flying out of my hands. And then I'm like, well, fuck, man. Now the pen's gone. And but then the child in me was like, well, go find the pen, dumb shit. And I'm like, I'll go find the pen. There's a game.
Fun.
What else am I going to do? I already peed 3 times, So I started crawling around my hands and knees. I'm in a room by myself, like cool. Like I made sure there's no creepy crawlies. There's nothing hiding under the bed. So I'm like crawling around, hands and knees, finding shit. And then I found it. And I'm like, hey, I found the pen. And then immediately I threw it again. And I'm like, cool, fucking throw the pen. And it was so much fun to be a kid. And that was really kind of what dialed it into me to like, be a kid. Do kid shit, right? Lay with your legs up the wall. I lay with my legs up the wall on my bed with my head off the bed doing the for like 10
Yep.
minutes, an hour, who knows, right?
Right.
It was so much fun, to just like twirl around for a little bit and get dizzy and then be like, oh shit, that's right, you're in the dark. It was really joyous to be bored and to find that like kid-like mentality. It was so much, yeah, it was a lot of fun. It was a lot of joy. But I just one more story I just remembered, along with the kid thing. Eating for me was really difficult. I found the food was beautiful. Viv was an amazing cook. She gave me a lot of options to eat, but for some reason, and it wasn't. There was something with utensils, and it wasn't the motor skill of like hand to mouth. There was almost like, and I've thought a lot about this. It was almost like if I was using the fork and the fork penetrated the food I was eating, it almost felt like I was breaking it. And it didn't feel normal. It didn't feel right. And so I found myself the first couple of meals, like just not eating. Like I'd pick at some things with my hands, but it was really confusing to me. And I couldn't put it together then as to why, but it was just confusing to me. But I would drink the tea and I felt nourished enough. I had some cashews and shit. But like one of the days she dropped off the food and I opened one of the containers and it was a grilled cheese, just unmistakably. Could smell the butter, could smell the toast, I could smell everything about it, and I'm like, oh yes, and immediately hand to mouth, got it. This makes sense. And then there was just like this little cup of tomato soup, and I'm like, oh my god, this is the best. And so I basically got to her, and she figured out that tomato soup and grilled cheese was where I needed to be at.
Yeah.
And it was a familiarity thing. There was a real familiarity with that. It made sense. I didn't have to use utensils. But what really kind of like what I unpacked later on was it was the most non-chaotic thing in a sense of chaoticness that I had not experienced in a long time, right?
Say that
Everything
one
was
more time.
so grilled cheese and tomato soup made sense,
Yeah.
right? There was a familiarity to that. The darkness, even though it was peaceful, it was dark, I could make my own practice. It was chaos because it
Yeah.
took me out of everything that I'm normally used to. So it was all chaoticness, all just random chaos. But this grilled cheese and tomato soup made it all make sense.
Yeah.
And so I remember sitting there like a kid on the side of a bed and like just dangling my feet, just kind of kicking my feet, eating my grilled cheese, sipping on my tea, just like it just felt so playful and fun. Like there were times after that where I would like sit underneath my blanket. Oh, one of the blankets that I brought had static electricity. It was very staticky.
Yeah.
And so like one of the, a couple days into it, I getting my blankets around me because I always meditate with a blanket around my waist and a blanket around my shoulders. And I was putting the blanket around my waist and I just ran my fingers across it. And all of a sudden I saw this streak of light and I was like, oh, what was that? Because I haven't seen light in days then.
Right.
And I realized there's static electricity in that. And it was fucking cool as shit. It was
That's
so cool to
awesome.
play with that. So like sometimes I would lay with like my, lay on my back, like a dead bug and then just like poke at the blanket and find these little pockets of static electricity and just kind of play with that shit. It was so interesting.
Oh,
Yeah, it was fun.
I love that.
There was there's one more. Yeah, there's just, these things keep popping up now. There was the way the darkness kind of highlighted itself was interesting. So I never saw light. And I never saw like my eyes never got used to shadows or anything like that. Like I could tell there was a lamp or a fucking table or whatever. It was all darkness. But there were times when I would sit and there was like this pocket of potential light, like light waiting to be noticed, would move across. And again, there was no light to it, but it was just like, hey, we're here. There's light in here. And then like sometimes it would feel like it was, or it would look like it was, those pockets of potential light were moving across something that had density, that had mass. Right. And so it was like, I don't know, it was very interesting the way that happened. But if you've ever seen like comic books from back in like the 50s, 60s, 70s, I guess 60s, like Batman specifically, like the way like they would the illustrators would accentuate the blackness of his outfit. They would accentuate it and shade with like these different colors of blue to help make it look like that's how black this is, that it's looking this blue, right?
Right.
That's how that light sometimes would manifest with this like these pockets of like potential photons of like this weird blue shadowy kind of stuff. It's very interesting.
Wow.
And I would just follow it forever. It was almost like there's like sometimes it'd be big massive, sometimes it's like those little floaties that would pop into your eye that when you notice it would just like float away again.
Right.
So it was very interesting in that way, but when I was so excited to see again. Like cuz I knew what day it was. Like I got my bearings back. I was excited to go to sleep that night. That was, I think, what I was most excited about because I wasn't sure how my dreams were going to stick around afterwards. So I was excited to go to sleep that night. I had the most horrific dreams ever, like terrible, 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 fucking horrible dreams. And
What was the date? Do you know?
it was the 5th. So I got out a couple days before the eclipse.
I was gonna say, yeah, that's okay.
Yeah,
That's
so
why I
within that
asked.
eclipse energy there.
Yep.
But but it was a balance thing, right? There was a lot of messages in there, and it was a balance thing because my guide was there, and it was like, hey, just as much as you play with this stuff, there's just a seriousness to it too, right? And the visions that I remember having were, so if you take the idea of white supremacy, right, the toxicity of white supremacy, that like I don't care about who you are, what you are, you're different, so go fuck yourself,
Yep.
and everything, all the VMity that I have is going just from that ignorant place. That idea of white supremacy, but human supremacy. All of humanity acting in that vile way against non-humans, right? So animals, earth, nature, all that shit, right? As a fucking humanity,
Right.
black, white, transgender, all of humanity acting in this vile, vicious, fucking terrible way, right? And I could feel like Earth not happy, like crying and like, but there was also a sense of peace to it as far as like, this is part of the process, like Earth's not going anywhere.
Yeah.
It'll figure itself out what to do with these little creatures that are wreaking havoc, right? But there was this big balance kind of thing, and so I woke up and then I was sweating. I was like, fuck, that was terrible. But it was like this, almost this drifting away, be like, remember, this is here too, right? And then woke up to Viv and knocking on the door, and I wanted to do a sunrise by this little lake that they had. The property was gorgeous. There's a lot of view spots, but I had to like walk to get to the view spots, like these like treks, and I didn't want to be blindfolded moving through all this shit. So I'm like, take me to an easy place.
Yep.
Let me see some stuff, get my bearings, and I'll go from there. And so there's this beautiful little pond on their property, and so she walked me over there just before sunrise. And sat down on a chair, and it was kind of a misty morning. I could feel the mist on the skin, and it was so cool to be led by her. And it was like a couple 100 yards, so it wasn't like just around the corner. She was like, I had to put my trust into her.
Yeah.
This woman that's probably half my size, I'm not a big dude, right?
Yeah.
And she's just guiding me, and I'm holding onto her arm, and we're just like kind of conversating as we're walking out there. It's little misty, little rain, and then we sit down. And I didn't have any expectations of emotions. Like sometimes I'm emotional, sometimes I'm not. I'm very stoic, so it just kind of however the day played out. But sat down, said, okay, take your blindfold off whenever you're ready. And I did, and I started to take it off, and it was interesting because there wasn't a lot of emotion, like, oh my God, this is so beautiful. There wasn't a lot of emotion there. There was a very, very clear observation mode kicked in for me. Like sometimes as a practitioner, like we're in these experiences as somebody receiving, but there's that part of our brain that's like, oh, I really like how they said that.
Right.
Oh, that's really cool how they presented that. Like, oh, that space held was great. Like we're taking notes, right?
Yep.
So that part of me was like, I could tell like that part of me was very present about like, you're taking notes on this, right? But growing up in the 80s, we had those old school tube TVs that were in the metal or the big wooden boxes, and ours was a shitty TV, so we had a big rubber hammer on top. So when it would go green or the lines would go sideways, we'd hit it on the top of the hammer, and it would go zzz, and it'd come back into phase. So that's kind of how the world presented itself to me, was from this like staticky, unfazed, lake, serene kind of image to like almost like Scooby Dooing in this like heat wave off of like concrete cement kind of thing into like this, oh, here's reality. And I'm like, oh, that was kind of fun. That was interesting. And it was really nice just to see this. And so lake's in front of me, having a conversation with Viv, ducks start landing, like all the poeticness of nature starts to unfold in front of me. Everything wakes up in the world, and I'm having this beautiful conversation with this amazing human being that's been caring for me for a couple, 5 days now. We talked for a while, then she had some shit she had to go do. And I just wandered around their property. They had like probably 80 acres. So I was, went to a couple lookout spots and walked around and sat in the grass for a while, sat in the woods, observed nature, journaled for a bit. Really just, it was exciting to move my body, involuntarily in a way. So yeah, it was really cool. And I wanted to, they gave me the opportunity to stay that night. So I got out Friday morning and I intended to stay that night, but then something inside me was like, "Nah, you're good.
Yeah.
You can drive home.
Ready to go.
You're fine." And so I hung out with them, had a meal. Actually, Finpo was sitting in the room adjacent to me, and it was very interesting because he invited me in to sit with him and to have a conversation with him while he was still in the dark. And so it was cool to like be able to go into his room. It was Viv and I, because he wanted to know about my experience. And this guy's been doing this for decades. So it's just like another fucking Tuesday to this guy, right? And he's like, "Is this cool, man? Just come in and talk with me." And so we chatted with him in the darkness. And I had just come out. So I was, again, ready to talk. He had been in there for 3 days. So he was ready to talk. So we just had this like cool conversation for almost like an hour or so while he was in the darkness. And then, just, kind of got in my car and drove home and had a cool experience driving home. Took my time. But it was, I can say personally it was the most profound thing that I've done, but I can't say it's because of the work. I can't say it's the darkness that's the most profound thing, but it's had the most profound impact on me, because of all the other stuff that I've done to get me ready for this stuff. But it was such a beautiful thing, and I highly look forward to doing it again. And I can say this about I can't say this about well, I guess it could still be like everything leads to the next. But when I had that moment about when my life presented itself in a Tonka and I started crying and I had that just release, that sorrow and that grief and the happiness, there was also this excitement to get back to life. Whereas when I do a lot of that deep work, there's this like, how the fuck am I going to go back to life now? How am I going to integrate this shit? But it was complete opposite. It was like, I cannot wait to get back and be a part of life again and to, enact some of the stuff I'm realizing. And that joy kind of, I think, was the most surprising thing about the whole experience was the joy and and it's still here. I'm really happy with life. I'm really happy and excited about the things that are happening. And there's still a lot of stuff that I don't know what's going to happen. There's a lot of uncertainty in life. There's a lot of things that might catch me off guard, but there's also like this desire to just be there and be present, to just see what happens. Right. It's like there's this like idea in reincarnation. One of the ideas in reincarnation that we meet up with these guides and they like say, okay, what do you want your life to be like in the next life? And you kind of set up your parameters for this shit. And so like in that idea, there's a version of Adam that said, you got this. You're going to be okay. Right. So all the fucked up shit that I get myself into and all the sideways feelings that I start to feel and all this shit, the losses in life, the joys, the elations, all that shit, there's a divine being up there that was like, you got this, dude.
My favorite words that I've had show up for me in healing spaces is, you were made for this.
Right.
And that's like so humbling at times when, we're trudging through what feels like the thickest mud. But I love hearing about the playfulness and the joy. And then honestly, that almost makes me more excited at the idea of trying it, where you said that you were ready and excited to come back to life, because that has been one of my biggest struggles with plant medicine, is that every time I've been like, please don't make me go back.
Right.
Like, there's such a peacefulness there can be
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
such a
Yeah.
peacefulness.
Yeah.
And the love, right? That's for me, it's like I come back, I would say more affirmed in my work because I know that that's what I'm trying to teach is people how to love unconditionally. I'm trying to learn and teach at the same
Right.
time.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I think there's a little bit of that relativity too. I took 11 days off to follow my husband around to conferences and to take my kids for part of their spring break to visit my grandfather who's turning 90 in September.
Woo! Fuck
And
yeah, man! Ninth decade. Good on
yep,
him.
and my girlfriend that lives over there, and I was ready. I wanted to come home. I wanted to get back to my routine and to be of service and like really this chapter with my kids' lives, like my youngest is going to be 12, my middle one's going to be 17. My eldest, who's 21, just moved back from Texas, and
Okay.
we're relearning how to be in relationship, and it's so interesting because
Yeah.
he's incredibly resistant to me.
Okay.
On the way here, I was talking to him. He's looking at a car, and I said, "So, do you want me to put you in a text chat with my friend who runs the service department at the dealership of the type of car that he's going to look at?" I said, "We could get you the Carfax, and then if you are good with the Carfax and you look at it tonight and you want to have it checked out, you can bring it to him and have it inspected. He won't charge you." He goes, "I'll think about it." I'm like, what the fuck? Inside my head, what the fuck is wrong with you? I'm literally handing you like free fucking service that's going to completely. And in the moment, as I'm like complaining in my head, I was like, he needs to learn his own lessons.
Yep. Definitely.
But I still had the courage to say, I'm really curious what goes on for you that you wouldn't accept this help. What I wanted to say is, you're being so much like your dad right now. Do you not see what it leads to when you don't accept help and feel like you have to do everything on your own? I didn't say any of that.
Right.
Wanted to,
Yeah.
but I am conscious enough, and I also know that that's not going to be what he wants to hear. And so I said, I'm really curious because there are people in my life, and his dad's not the only one. I think it's Wired for Love. He talks about, are you an anchor, an island, or a wave? And, being the one that's healed through being a wave. And now I waffle between the anchor and the island. The radical island is, I got it. I don't need your help. It's fine. I'll figure it out. Don't worry about it. And we've learned that because we've needed to. And how different is our life when we come together collectively and we don't have to all figure it out, right? So I'm trying to gift this to my 21-year-old and he don't want it.
Yep.
So, but the excitement of coming back to where we can be of service, right? And even in that conversation, while I'm asking him these questions, what I'm hearing and downloading intuitively is, you could show up for him when he asks you for it. But I also told him about the humanness of me. I said, if I keep showing up to a place, offering myself to be of service, and it's not utilized, at some point I'm going to stop showing up. I told him, I don't want to stop showing up for you.
Right.
And so, he doesn't give me a whole lot of feedback. But
Yeah.
I knew in that moment my responsibility was to be honest with him about what it feels like to be a mom who doesn't feel like I can be of service. But also like, hey, maybe look at this pattern. Because that is my projected fear, is that he's going to end up down the road suffering from incredible loneliness, burnt out from trying to do everything on his own. And I just, I don't want to put him in bubble wrap. I don't believe in that. I've never been that kind of parent.
Right.
But I would like to maybe soften some of the swords a little bit, just dole them out.
Yeah. Yeah, I know. My mom actually had a conversation with me before she passed, and she, my oldest daughter and I have had some issues, growing up, and she was, a little older when her mom and I separated, so she, bore the brunt of it a little bit more, and so we had, a couple of years where we didn't really talk that much, through her choice. and not to say I didn't deserve it. I was kind of a shitty dad for a while, right?
Yeah.
I came back around, but she had her rights. And so I remember talking to my mom about, like, we'd been good for a while, quote unquote good. We're back in speaking terms, but there's still times where like it gets triggered, blah, 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 whatever, human shit. And my mom told me, she was like, Adam, you got to realize, like, you were kind of an asshole growing up. Like, you weren't that, I mean, you were respectful to an extent, but you were still kind of a dick, right? And then when you moved away, you didn't really talk to me a lot at all. And I think if it wasn't for you having kids, again, my mom talking to me, then you wouldn't have talked to me for many, many years. But you had kids, and I had a reason, right? And you had a reason to let me in, and you needed help and wanted help, whatever, but we were there. So let your daughter do that same shit. Like, she's going to figure it out. She's going to come around. You've not done anything to, like, push her away, and you keep trying, right? So keep trying, keep being in her life. But don't, stop fucking moping around about all this shit, Like, people go through phases, right?
Yeah.
It's going to be fine.
Yeah.
And it was kind of like that little bitch slap from my mom that I needed. It's like, hey, remember, you were an asshole too. You've kind of come around. You're doing okay. Let her have her process.
Yeah.
I think we need that sometimes. As much as we do want to bubble wrap our kids or the loved ones in our lives, there is also this thing of like, oh man, I'm gonna be here as much as I can. Hopefully, we don't do anything to like separate. Like nothing's unbreakable. Unresolvable here.
Right.
But at the same time, like you gotta go out there and set some shit on fire. See what happens.
Yeah. Interestingly enough, with my children, the one that is the most likely to set some shit on fire, she's the one that scares me the least. And I think it's because what you were just saying is, for those of us that were more rebellious, there's a familiarity of what it is to turn that around. Whereas the people pleasers that don't accept help, don't ask for help, I see those as the ones that tend to be more the long-term sufferers. And that's just my own more immediate experience within my, family and my ancestors of just the pain that it is to live so internally isolated, even if you're like surrounded by people.
Right. One of the issues too that I've been seeing with the whole people pleaser, and I don't want to open up a whole can of worms after a 2.5 hour conversation,
Right.
but once people pleasers get to the fuck it stage, and I'm going to just be brutally honest, I'm tired of just being a people pleaser. I'm just going to let everything out. My honesty needs to be heard.
Oh, yeah.
Right? And that we have to understand that your honesty has been in a fucking thought tank in your own head. Nobody offering outside opinions outside of that. So there's a lot of negativity and a lot of ignorance is probably going to be popping out. But now that you've made the decision to speak your mind, you're going to back that ignorance because that's your mind being spoken. Get out of your fucking way. Talk about this shit with other people outside of your thought process. Like, your opinions should be heard,
right,
but you got to remember that they're your opinions, right?
And they're old.
And they're old, exactly, right? And they've been festering, like you said. So it's like, be careful, right? Yes, get out of your people pleasing. Yes, like we're gonna say some ignorant shit when we start to get out of that because we don't realize how ignorant we've been sounding to ourselves, because to ourselves we sound brilliant.
Well, and the choosing of it, like you were saying, this is my choice, and it's always been our choice, and to take responsibility is quite challenging.
Yeah,
that's why AA served me for so long. Was like, I needed a place where I could be an utter blubbering asshole victim, whiny bitch, and gently, slowly over time, I was encouraged to be able to work through that and start to own it.
right.
But yeah, it'll be interesting to continue to witness my children and their journeys and my own, and just the evolution. Yeah, it's great hearing about your experience with the darkness. It's not been attractive until that moment where you said you were excited to come back to life. So not that you completely changed my mind, but you've opened the door a little bit.
Yeah, that's all right. We'll take that crack of light in there,
For
definitely.
Sure.
Well, thank you for holding this space for me. I know that it's nice to turn the tables every once in a while.
Yeah, I hope people are able to enjoy getting to hear a little bit about you and your world and what you have going on,
Yeah.
and how you continue to stay inspired and led, really, through your own work. Because I think that that's something that people just are pretty ignorant to. It's like, yes, we show up, you hold a lot of space for a lot of people, you provide some beautiful services. But I think that a lot of times, and for anybody in their job and in their career, people don't understand how much work goes into being able to show up
Right.
in the integral way that we do. And
Yeah.
yeah.
I appreciate that because I think a lot of times we can be in a world that's either chasing certificates for the sake of chasing them, or thinking that you can watch something on YouTube and figure it out.
Yeah.
There's a balance in between, but it's you doing your own personal self work to understand like where you need to be with that.
Yeah,
So thank you, appreciate that.
for sure. I
Well,
was just looking at the calendar just to drop it. Your next yoga nidra and sound bath at Wild Nature Retreat Center is Friday, May 17th at 7 p.m.
it is. Yes, it is.
So make sure you join us for that. Anybody who's listening.
Tickets on sale at adamrealhealing.com
Yes,
through
yes.
Eventbrite.
Awesome. What do you have coming up that you want to share with your people?
Oh man, I am really excited about. Um, I have a teacher training that's coming up that I'm really excited about. I used to do teacher trainings about 8 years ago. So teacher trainings and retreats are two of the new kind of avenues that I'm venturing towards over the next 18 months or so.
Awesome.
So teacher training is at Bliss in Monroe. It's a 200-hour Vinyasa Hatha Yin teacher training in person. And then I'm doing a retreat in Costa Rica with Cameron Nagashima, Jeff Hawkins, and Steve Wimmer.
Ooh.
At a place called Blue Osa. It's going to be in November, pre-holiday kind of get your shit straight.
Is this a
retreat.
men's work?
No, it's going to be co-ed. It just happens to be 4 dudes that are leading it.
Okay.
But yeah, co-ed. We got 24 spots. I think we've already got maybe 10 people that are interested.
Nice.
So yeah, some cool things happening. I'm really excited to like create some space to figure out like where my next ventures are. And that's again, some of the stuff I did in the darkness was like, did some house cleaning, like where's my energy going? What are these opportunities that are presenting themselves? Who is jumping into my life in a new way, and why? And what kind of traits are they bringing in that maybe you've moved past in life, and that you're being presented with these familiar packages to be like, hey, oh, that personality, and you should stay away from it.
Yeah.
Like it's and so it's really nice. It's
I love
interesting.
the tests.
Yeah.
I love to hate them sometimes, but they are so valuable. It's like, yeah, being able to see where we've grown.
Yep.
Yeah.
You never know until you get the mirror in front of you.
That's so beautiful.
And yourself, what do you got going up?
I was just looking. So Saturday, July 27th, I will be a guest teacher at a retreat this summer with Sterling, Rose, and Sean. I'm trying to see if I can find the retreat is called Scene.
Okay.
And if I can pull it up, here we go. Excuse me. The retreat is called Be Seen. It's a women's retreat. It's from July 26th to 28th in Cedar Woolley. So here in, just north of Seattle.
Okay.
2 really incredible women. Sean has attended one of my workshops before, and then Sterling and I've done some work together. She's a coach and an embodiment photographer. Sean is also a coach. She's the one that I was talking about at the beginning that works mostly with like nurses and medical professionals. But this retreat, I will be teaching kind of like a wild woman sensual movement workshop. So, yeah, this one I feel super excited about. Particularly for me this last year, I've been deeping, as you know, the previous podcast that I've been a guest on with you, deepening my work around sacred sexuality, doing sacred pelvic healing work, really empowering people to own their pleasure and their joy. And like we were just talking about, the universe has hand delivered all of these tests to see, like, how committed are you to your joy and your pleasure? Are you sure you don't want to go back over into the darkness realm where you've spent a lot of time getting really cozy?
Right.
And so that feels really exciting. Yeah, we're going to continue to build our event structure at the retreat center. I am currently under construction with my coaching program. I'm going to be creating an online program.
Okay.
Part of that is so that it's more affordable and accessible to people.
Right.
Part of it is also that in order for people to do my program and work one-on-one with me, they will need to have done my online program.
Okay.
And it's so that
It's like
I
a
have
prereq kind of idea.
Say it again?
Like a prerequisite kind of idea.
Yeah.
Cool.
And it's so that when people come to work with me, they have a foundation of work already that has set them up to be more successful for some of the deeper work. And it's not to say that people can't do that or that I can't meet people where they're at. But I think that in order to be able to take people where I would like to and be able to focus on what I would like to focus on, it would be really helpful. It's kind of like if you're going to start practicing yoga, it's really helpful to go to a beginner's 101 workshop.
Yep.
You can jump in and figure it out, but I will tell you that your alignment will likely be off.
Right.
And you're not going to have a teacher in the middle of a class with 15 to 30 students that can come over and tell you that you need to internally rotate your femur.
Right. Yeah,
So,
exactly.
Doing those beginning things to help create a solid foundation where there's more stability and really integrity is what it is. As well as, like I said, if you want to work with me one-on-one right now, it's a hefty financial commitment. And that's what I need to do for myself to maintain my health and well-being. And so this can be way more accessible. And within that, I'll also be launching online group work, which I love. I've always loved group work. I would like it to be in person, but again, this is the world we're living in. People need things that are a little bit more convenient.
Options, yep.
And I live a trek. My space it's an hour outside of Seattle. So
But there's so much romance to that. I mean, maybe not living there all the time. You got to have some amenities. Might get sick of that every once in a while, but like, for me, going to your space, there's a romance to it because it's like, it's close enough but still far away.
yeah.
It's
And
close
that's
enough
what
that
we
they're
love
like, I
about
can
it.
get to a grocery store in like a couple, 10, 15 minutes. But it's far enough away for me to be like, I'm going to Aiwa's property.
Yeah.
It's not like house, it's like property,
Yeah. No, I love that. And what's great is the drive to our place, whether you're coming from the south side or most commonly from the west side, it's so beautiful. The roads, they dip and they wind, and the canopy of trees and the way the light breaks through. It really is beautiful. And for, this next winter season, when we cycle back around, we've got our fireplace reinstalled. So we've got that ambiance.
Cool.
Yeah. Actually the deck for the camping pad got started this weekend. So we've got a lot of things kind of happening to help finalize more of the construction that we're needing for bigger types of gatherings and our showers and bathrooms and stuff. But
There you
go. Bathrooms have been finished. We still need to do our showers and our kitchen, but we've got pop-ups for those right now. And there are other events that other people are hosting coming up. Also, Jeffrey Marks will be back. He's a medium. He's been there 3 times, I think, so far. He does group psychic readings, connecting with your ancestors. Super fun to be able to come and even just be a witness. Not everybody necessarily gets a reading, depending on the group size, but it's a heck of a deal to come do a group reading, and then you can always sign up for individual sessions with him. But and we're hoping to get our concert series going. The struggle right now is finding artists that are willing to collaborate versus wanting a guarantee on the financial side.
Gotcha. Yeah.
Plus, we are also trying to figure out our relationship with a sound person. So if a band doesn't come with their own sound system,
Right.
it's a minimum of $3,500 for us for a day. So, when you calculate that plus the cost of a band and porta
Mm-hmm.
potties and oh, and we don't want to just break even. We'd like
Right.
to
Like
actually
to make
make a
some money off of
living.
this so we can do this over and over
Yeah,
again. Yeah.
it gets tricky.
Yeah.
So, we're figuring things out. A goal of mine this year I'm actually looking to create a board that works with me with the retreat for
Okay.
people that facilitate regularly and are looking to create a working relationship. Because I think that would, one, just serve my heart in general. I love working with a group of people. We would be putting our heads and our hearts together. And then hopefully it would also be something that would support all of us financially. So, kind of like a talent agent, right? So, for whoever is bringing us the talent, they would get a portion of the sales
Right.
of
Yeah.
tickets and that kind of thing. So, I have all the ideas. It's the time
Mm-hmm.
to be able to put it all in motion.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of us in this world, people pleasers, but also, passion pleasers. We want to say yes, but then it requires you to show up. And, with your own journey and then working with people that are on their own journeys, that is a big part of the battle.
Yeah.
Which is also why, if you're new to me as a client, I don't work with you unless you make a 3-month commitment, seeing me weekly.
Right.
And it's because I'm not a band-aid.
Yeah.
I'm here to share with you tools that will change your life, and you have to make a commitment to learning them and practicing them. And so, it's taking what I've learned in this smaller structure within my private practice and then utilizing it in my bigger business practice.
Right.
And yeah, not doing everything alone.
Nope. That's why there's community. We shouldn't have to reinvent the wheel all the time and do all the shit. It's like,
Yeah.
there's a reason why we're all unique, but nobody's special.
Yeah.
You get all that uniqueness together and people can play off each other in their own unique ways and still be honest with themselves, but contribute in their own way. And that's like a beautiful, beautiful version of humanity that we can be stepping towards.
Yeah, absolutely.
Oh yeah.
Which lastly, I'll share Soul Family Sunday is still happening.
Okay.
First Sunday of every month from 5 to 8, we gather at the retreat center in person.
Mm-hmm.
We do a 90-minute healing session and then a 90-minute community potluck.
Cool.
So that's always up on my link in my bio on Instagram, both on the Wild Nature Retreat side and on Sensuous Revival.
Sensuous Revival, yeah. Very cool.
Yeah.
Well, thanks for all that you do. Thanks for turning the tables on me today and holding space for me.
Yeah, thank you.
Appreciate everything. Yeah, look forward to having you back.
Absolutely.
All right. Thank you so much for spending time with Aiua and myself. Please check out the show notes for ways to maybe do some more research on the facility that I went to. If you want to get in touch with Aiua, I'll have her in contact info in there as well. So thank you so much. Obeisance and love. We'll see you next time.